Good afternoon, 3 minutes past 12 is the time. Tom Swarbrick with you here, leading Britain's conversation. Are we ready for this? Are we up for this? Because it's happening. It is really happening. It wasn't a dream. We wake up today with the President of the EU, Jean-Claude Juncker, saying this divorce is not amicable. He wants Article 50 triggered now. Jeremy Corbyn, facing a leadership challenge, says he will stand again if he is deposed. Nicola Sturgeon speaking in the last few minutes in Scotland, saying she is readying her party for another referendum, as it is reportedly the case that Boris and Michael Gove start formulating a Brexit government. And there is a lot of worry out there as well. But the world is still turning, the birds are still singing, you can still get a sausage roll at Greg's, cricket is still a thing, we're okay. A lot has been said about how split the nation is, and talking to friends about it who voted for Remain, there is a feeling that they don't feel like they know their next-door neighbour anymore. They don't know what this country has become now. They don't know who or what speaks for it. Are we really a place that doesn't look at populist rhetoric and think, nah, not you, not that version of events, we're not that sort of place? And I have to say, as much as yesterday's result came as a shock, I do think that view is a bit unfair. We all know that there will be some people who voted Brexit on the back of the immigration issue and the NHS money thing. They are going to be hugely disappointed in the coming few years, it looks like. But there are many millions of people who voted Brexit for entirely logical, thoughtful and optimistic reasons. Not that they want their country back, whatever that means, but that they wanted their country forward. They wanted a change. They wanted a big change. They wanted a new set of circumstances which would allow Britain to do what Britain does well and lead in. I wasn't one of them, because I voted to Remain. And after months of genuine indecision, I did what lots of people, I think, would have done, and loitered over the ballot paper for such a length of time that I was practically being asked to move on. I thought about leaving, but natural caution, the voice in my head, and ultimately the weight of experts on the Remain side took over. And if I'm honest, heart of heart honest, I instantly regretted it. And my neighbour can back me up on this. My neighbour Anne, I know she's listening. Morning, Anne. She can back me up on this one, particularly after what Jean-Claude Juncker said ahead of the vote about further renegotiation. That was the thing that made me think, why are we voting for an organisation that we clearly cannot affect anymore? But I couldn't bring myself to actually do it. So this morning I want to talk to Remainers who aren't necessarily feeling angry or betrayed or let down or feeling like you need to emigrate or that you don't know your countrymen anymore, that we can all accept that above a certain baseline vote there are plenty of right-thinking, intelligent people who came to their own informed conclusion about this question and that they voted out. It may well be that the angriest Remainers are people of my age. They are late 20s, mid-30s, probably Londoners who feel like their future has basically been decided for them. Is that how you feel? You look at the demographics of this vote and you think the older generation have basically shanked it for you. Can you come on and tell me how you are so certain that this is the wrong thing? You are absolutely convinced that the old have stuffed the young and the generational divide is as cataclysmic as the political divide. 75% of 18 to 24 voted for Remain. It's their country, it's their future. Do you feel disregarded? Do you feel like you are of little or no relevance? Boris Johnson was actually quite quick to address this point earlier on yesterday. This is what he had to say.
I want to speak to the millions of people, directly to the millions of people who did not vote for this outcome, especially young people who may feel that this decision in some way involves pulling up a drawbridge or any kind of isolationism. Because I think the very opposite is true. We cannot turn our backs on Europe. We are part of Europe. Our children and our grandchildren will continue to have a wonderful future as Europeans travelling to the continent, understanding the languages and cultures that make up our common European civilization, continuing to interact with the peoples of other countries in a way that is open and friendly and outward-looking. And I want to reassure everybody that, in my view, as a result of this, Britain will continue to be a great European power.
How helpful was that? If you voted to remain, you're under the age of 25, you're a young person looking forward to your future in this country, you want to help shape the future of this country, you are left dismayed, worried, upset by the vote yesterday. How helpful was it to hear Boris Johnson speak in that way? As the future of this country, which is perhaps a better way of saying young people, as the future of this country, as shocked and as concerned as you might be with this decision, nevertheless, you are positive today. You are optimistic today that howsoever we got here, we have a unique chance to do something different, better, more outward-facing to the rest of the world, more liberal, more tolerant, and you are willing, even in defeat, to grab it with both hands, to help shape it maybe, to engage with it. We will make it work because we have to. Or have the Wrinkleys stuffed us? 0345 6060 973 84850 is the number you need to text. You can tweet at LBC. I'm at Tom Swarbrick 1. Particularly keen to hear from you if you didn't get to vote, by the way. You're 16, 17. You are left furious by what's happened. It's your future, your country, your opportunities that may be negatively, maybe positively affected in the future. But for crying out loud, you should have been able to have your say. 0345 6060 973. Right, enough waffle from me. 10 minutes past 12. Let's get Rachel Venables, on the line, LBC's reporter, who is in Hemel Hempstead. And I gather, Rachel, you visited a school in Hemel Hempstead a little earlier to speak to some of those disengaged young non-voters. Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Tom. Yes, absolutely. Well, as you've been saying, it certainly felt on Friday morning that not the journalists, not the politicians, not the general public expected what came out of those polls. Even, of course, Nigel Farage seeming to concede defeat. I was actually spent the night at an election count in Chelmsford for the East of England. We did expect Essex to vote leave, but we didn't expect the rest of the country to follow. So after a couple of hours sleep, I thought it would probably be a good idea to go back to school. I think, we didn't know what was going on. Let's find out from the experts. And Mr. Farmery's Year 12 politics class at the Hemel Hempstead School in Hertfordshire were good enough to welcome me into one of their lessons because I wanted to find out just how a group of young people, a group of educated, very politically minded young people who were just months away from being allowed to vote felt about having no say in a decision which, as you say, will affect the rest of their lives.
I have very strong opinions on this entire referendum. It was a shame that 16, 17-year-olds couldn't vote.
I think it definitely would have affected how the end result came out, because it would be more representative, because obviously, as I said before, it's going to affect more of the younger generation.
I was hoping initially, I think when I heard it in the election campaign, that we would be able to vote, but obviously that wasn't the case, which was disappointing.
And what do you guys know about the EU and why did you come to that decision? What did you base that on?
Well, I came to the decision because of what impact it would have on my future. So, I would consider myself someone who in the future would like to work or live in European countries, and I know that that's become significantly more difficult.
And how did you feel then when you found out that you guys wouldn't get to vote, that it would be capped at 18?
Well, I was disappointed just because I knew that it would have such a huge impact on our lives and what would happen to our futures after uni, trying to get jobs and things like that. So, I was quite upset.
It was definitely unfair because I think, especially for the old generation, they've kind of, not obviously everyone in the old generation, but they've lived for different eras than us, so a lot of it's not going to affect them as much as it will affect us. So it's kind of you're voting on behalf of someone even though you don't understand what their opinion is.
I do think it was a real shame that people didn't get to vote, because I knowing how intelligent and coherent the arguments from people in my class are, in my peer group, definitely they should have had a vote.
LBC's Rachel Venables reporting from the Hemel Hempstead School a little earlier on. 12 minutes past 12. Let's get your voices on this afternoon. James is called from Barnes. Afternoon, James.
Hello, yes, and I'm 70.
Right, we'll start at the other end of the spectrum, sir. Say again.
First of all, I just want to put out, of course I understand why people feel as they do, but there's a hugely positive message to all this, because we now have the opportunity, and young people really want to realise this, that we have gone so long in the European Union, we have not been able to help our brothers and sisters in the Commonwealth countries, which are underdeveloped countries, which really they don't need aid, they need to be helped to trade and build up their countries, and we can do that now. And, this will help migration, all sorts of things, and give people a pride in their own countries and not having to, look, because the last thing they want is aid, most of these people. They really want to be able to do it themselves, and we can help them do it now. And it's a wonderful opportunity. It's a magnificent opportunity.
Well, James, do you understand, having seen that magnificent opportunity emerge now, or what you're calling it as a magnificent opportunity emerge, do you see why people are so worried, particularly, arguably, younger people are so concerned by this?
Yes, because it was never pointed out to them. It never was. It's been very difficult to talk to young people because they have not been given, many of them. I mean, some are fabulously articulate, but many are not, and they have been given this awful sort of sheltered way of looking at things, which shuts down argument with awful words like hate and racism, which they are not at all.
Well, James, hang on there, because I want to bring in Henry, who's phoned from Croydon. Afternoon, Henry.
Lovely. Hello, Henry.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm very well. Now, I gather, you're 16, right?
Yes, indeed.
So you unfortunately haven't been able to vote in this. Do you think clearly that you should have been able to vote, given that this is dictating your future in this country?
Yeah. I think it would have made a lot of sense, seeing as a lot of, as you've already pointed out, under 25, 75% of them voted to remain. And also, watching the news, they also mentioned the fact that, looking at the polls, the whole of London was majority wanted to remain as well.
Are you worried, therefore, Henry? Are you worried about your future in this country?
If it continues the way it is already, then, yeah, being left out of the union doesn't somehow make us stronger, makes us at a weaker advantage. We won't be able to renegotiate better deals with them that we're pushed out. We'll be on the back foot for everything that comes ahead.
James, persuade Henry that it will be all right.
Henry, do you realise that all throughout all this period we've been in the European Union, that our trade has been so restricted to the countries in Africa, within the Commonwealth, the old Commonwealth, that we can, and these countries which have been dependent on aid rather than growing their economies because of a lack of trade. Do you realise that we can now give splendid opportunity to have real pride in their countries and build up their economies? Do you realise that?
Even if we weren't in the EU or out of the EU, we can still be great either way. All that we had to do was...
But Henry, do you realise that we have not been able to do that because that was not allowed us while we were in the European Union? Do you not realise that? Do you not want to help those countries and expand the trade throughout the world and build up the underdeveloped nations? Do you not want to be able to do that?
But how does leaving help us other people?
Well, the argument is, Henry, the argument is that because we're now free of the trading bloc, we're able to extend our trade to other countries overseas that we previously weren't able to trade with precisely because of EU rules. And it is, I think, and I say this as someone who voted Remain, it is, I think, waking up the day after, presenting itself as a great opportunity. And I can certainly see the irony in those who voted against a political class because they mistrusted them, now placing arguably more trust than ever in the political class to get this one right. I can see how that irony presents itself now. But I do think that for those, and Henry, thank you for your call, and to you, James, as well, I do think for those of you, particularly young voters, worrying today, yesterday I did worry, today I'm much more optimistic. 0345 6060 973. Even if you voted Remain as a person, maybe, mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s, mid-30s, you now see this, despite the worry yesterday, despite the concern of not knowing your next-door neighbour, you see this now as a wonderful opportunity, and you want to be there at the forefront, helping to shape it. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to Tom Swarbrick on a historic afternoon. We will be hearing a little later on from Nicola Sturgeon. We've heard earlier from Jeremy Corbyn. I can tell you the 6 founding members of the EU say that the UK urgently now needs to trigger Article 50. We'll be getting the latest breaking news this afternoon throughout the programme. You're listening to Tom Swarbrick on LBC 1218. 2 is the time, afternoon. Text here on 84850. I'm sick of hearing the old are responsible for the Brexit outcome. I voted for my grandchildren. This is a great time for the young, and it's an insult to us to be blamed. This was an across-age result. Nobody is blaming anybody for the Brexit vote. It has happened, and I think the recriminations that we have seen before the vote about Leave, Remain and taking sides, I think we're through that now. We're past that. We have to be. And there has to be an acceptance that this is the result, and we've got to make it work. And even as someone who voted for Remain, I think it does present itself as a great opportunity, and there has to be a way of easing some of the worries that younger people, the future, I'm going to call them, of this country have about the direction of it. 0345 6060 973. Clearly there's a lot going on this afternoon. Let's first bring in LBC's political editor Theo Usherwood, who I think, Theo, you've managed to get some sleep. I'm not quite sure, but maybe you've got an hour or so.
Yeah, I got a little bit of sleep last night. The ramifications of this Brexit vote are now starting to become clearer politically, because up in Scotland, the Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has said this morning that her government will seek to enter immediate discussions with Brussels to protect Scotland's place in the EU. And she also said outside her official residence in Edinburgh that she's urged her cabinet to agree, and they've agreed to begin work on legislation that would allow for the option of a second independence referendum. We can hear exactly what she's been saying.
We are determined to act decisively, but in a way that builds unity across Scotland about the way forward. As I said yesterday, a second independence referendum is clearly an option that requires to be on the table, and it is very much on the table. And to ensure that that option is a deliverable one in the required timetable, steps will be taken now to ensure that the necessary legislation is in place. Cabinet this morning formally agreed that work. However, most of our discussions this morning centred on what we can do in the here and now, and in the negotiations that lie ahead to protect Scotland's relationship with the European Union and our place in the single market. Cabinet agreed that we will seek to enter into immediate discussions with the EU institutions and with other EU member states to explore all possible options to protect Scotland's place in the EU.
Now, what Nicola Sturgeon is in effect trying to do, she's saying, it may take some time to have this second independence referendum. But what she wants to happen in the meantime is she wants to make sure that Scotland can continue to have a relationship with the European Union, that it can remain in the European Union. And whether the proviso of that needs to be there's a second referendum and Scotland votes to leave the Union with England and Wales, then of course they would maintain that. That would be they would maintain that link with the European Union. But that's what she's trying to do is safeguard her position, Scotland's position, because she knows that the referendum, a second independence referendum, isn't going to come in play immediately.
And clearly, a lot of the decisions in Scotland rest upon the timing of Article 50 being triggered. Because my understanding is once that's triggered, that's it, there's no going back. And is there a way in which Scotland can get something in place before Article 50 is triggered in order to have their say and create their ties with Brussels?
Article 50 is a 2-year process.
Yeah.
So the question is, and we've heard what Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the European Commission, has been saying. He's been saying he wants to see it triggered immediately. Get on with it, and the thinking behind that in Europe is that they don't want everybody thinking that the other countries like France, where you've got Marine Le Pen calling for a French referendum, where you've got Holland, where you've got the anti-immigration minister Geert Wilders calling for a referendum, that somehow there's going to be a soft peddling and Britain's going to come out with a cosy little deal where it gets to restrict the flow of labour, and while at the same time having all the good trade deals with the rest of the EU. So what Cameron is now trying to do is to say, well, actually, I want to delay that process, let the new person take over. So there's a lot of pressure building up now to start that process, and it's at the end of that 2-year process, if there isn't a trade deal in place with the rest of the EU, that's as it is. And that once that brings to an end, that's c'est terminé, as the French would say.
Theo, thank you very much indeed. LBC's political editor Theo Usherwood, who is surviving on limited sleep at this momentous time, as one might be able to understand. Theo, thank you. 0345 6060 973, the number you need to join the conversation this afternoon. Corrie has called from Enfield. Afternoon, Corrie.
Afternoon. I voted to stay in. I have 3 children who are all of voting age, and they actually voted. To stay out. I mean, they voted to stay out as well. I do apologise. Yeah. They, like I say, they're all of voting age: 18, 22, and 27. And I voted because I thought it was the right thing to do. My concerns are exactly what is happening right now, where you've got the the paper they want drawn up immediately so that we have to get out within 2 years. Those were the things that I was concerned about, but actually taking control of our country with regards to the politicians. Also, I found particularly scary because actually it's an unknown entity.
Well, it's unknown either way, isn't it? And that was the argument both sides. There are positives and negatives to remaining, and there are positives and negatives to staying, which is why having a binary choice in a referendum is ridiculous. Yeah. Corrie, what did your 27, 22 and 18-year-old make of voting out? Did they saw it as an opportunity for themselves, ultimately, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, looking at... we've never been a family that's had to... fortunately had to go, for any kind of government handout. We've had to fight for everything ourselves. My children have never claimed benefits up until my daughter became disabled a few months ago. So we've never claimed anything from anybody. We've actually earned everything. However, that doesn't mean we have very much. And for them, they have no... And they don't earn enough money to have the prospect of owning their own property. Yeah. Because of the types of jobs that they do. And they equally, because they don't fit into any specific category, they're not entitled to any kind of support through social housing.
But they feel that a Brexit vote will hopefully make that better for them.
I think what we all, as a family, decided was that actually we need to kind of stop and take stock, really, and this is the only way that they could see that we needed to take stock.
That's an interesting way of reading it, that this is a pause button on our relationship with the European Union, because what the founding members are saying this afternoon is that they want the pause to be lifted and for Article 50 to be triggered immediately. Corrie, thank you for your call. Emma's in Dulwich on this. Hi, Emma.
Hi there. Yeah, I was interested in your comment about people who voted to remain, a lot of young people, waking up and feeling that they don't know their neighbours.
Yes.
And the implication is almost that, if you vote Remain, you're a decent person, you're an outward-looking person, you're a kind person. If you vote Brexit, you're sort of ill-informed, a bit thick, a bit impressionable, a bit mean-minded, racist.
And that would be a terrible way and an inaccurate way of the picture, of painting that picture, as we've already discussed.
I think it's happened, though. I mean, and I work in quite liberal organisations where it doesn't surprise me that sort of young people and older people, I would say are actually quite bigoted about people that don't share their own liberal views, yeah?
So you think that people who find that they disagree with some people immediately view them as thicker, stupider, not up to the same kind of intellectual standards because they don't agree with them?
Absolutely. I think we that's quite apparent. I mean, it's apparent sort of, in the media, and it's apparent if anybody's actually working out there, with people who've got different views. There is an acceptable way. Do
you think I completely understand your point about people being castigated for voting Leave and people being thought of as being thick, racist, xenophobic or whatever that. And that was a genuine worry for me when making that decision, actually, that you were going to have to persuade some people that, no, of course, you can vote Leave and not be a racist or not even be considered anything close to being racist or xenophobic. Do you agree that there is a very clear and overwhelming, arguably, liberal argument for voting to Leave, as Boris Johnson made yesterday?
I think there are many arguments for voting to leave, but I also think that if people do feel that the identity of their country and their culture is changing, that is also very valid, and that should not be called racist. I think I think we're a very tolerant country. I know there were issues with racism back in the 60s and the 70s from some quarters, but I honestly don't. I think that could have been ironed out. and I don't think people were really intolerant to people as we were going into the 80s, etc.
Well, I think there'd be plenty of listeners who would disagree with you about tolerance during the 80s and 90s. We are certainly, I think, more tolerant now as a country, and it'd be hard pressed to say that I had a caller on the other week saying that Britain is fundamentally a racist country. I think that's total baloney and completely disagree with it. Emma, thank you very much. I wonder what impact age has had on this vote. Whether there are those of you who voted Leave who are a bit older who would say the young people now screaming and a hollering for a new referendum. 1 million people have signed a petition for a second referendum. Whether they are hard losers or whether there's a job to be played, a job to be had in showing them the optimistic side of leaving the EU. Because as we enter Independence Day +1, there is still a lot of worry out there. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to Tom Swarbrick here on LBC. At 12:33, your news headlines come from Rupert Bartier. In a little line of breaking news here on LBC, Britain's European Commissioner, Lord Jonathan Hill, has stood down. He says it's not right for him to continue as Britain's Commissioner in the European Union. Lord Hill standing down this afternoon. That's probably to be expected, I would have thought, as a result of that vote yesterday. Wondering what impact that vote is having, particularly on younger voters and also on those younger people who didn't get to vote, those 16, 17-year-olds who are going to have to live with this decision for 60+ years. Carla is in Chislehurst. Hi, Carla.
Hi.
Hi. Tell me how you're feeling today. You're 19.
Yes. I'm just recently turned 19.
And how did you vote?
I voted for Leave, actually.
Interesting. Why was that?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I think that. Oh, the doors are not opening on the bus. Sorry, I can't.
Oh no, nightmare! You can't. You're stuck in the bus.
Yeah.
Whilst you're stuck there, tell me why you voted to leave, Carla.
Oh yes. No, I voted to leave because I think, as some of your other callers have mentioned, that we haven't been able to sort of like make the rules with how we trade because we've been under the EU for so long. And although like our government does have an influence in the EU itself, not as much as our country needs. And I think that we needed a change for better, for worse. And yeah, if people having a complaint about the fact that we're leaving now and now that's going to cause holiday prices to go up, having to wait longer in airports, and other exchange rates being pricier as well. If that is the real concern for people, why we have left, then I think they need to reevaluate the reasons why that they're not happy.
So the concern about their holiday price going up is nothing as your concern about whether or not we'd get the change that we wanted in the European Union in 30, 40, 50 years' time.
Yeah, and I think
that's not a bad way of looking at it.
A lot of people's arguments about, I don't want to put the Tories in control of if we leave and stuff like that. But I think people didn't take into account that we're not always going to have a Tory government. We're not always going to have the same government. And there's always going to be that opportunity to change. And we have been under 4 years of austerity of the Tory government. And we needed a change.
Did you find, Carla, and this is based on the numbers, which might be unfair because, of course, it doesn't give you the individual, but the numbers suggest that of your age range, you are more likely to vote for Remain, and of your age range, you are less likely to consider the potential future impacts of a new government on the UK as well. Did you have a hard time explaining to people why you were voting Leave?
Yeah, I mean, I had like a few friends that were very similar-minded in leaving and wanting it to change for better or for worse. And then I had quite a few friends on the other side, which were very much like, I want to be Remain. I want to have the stability. I want to stick with the status quo. And obviously, it's like, but okay, how well has that worked out for us? We are in so much of a crisis with our NHS. Okay, yeah, the pound has fallen, but that was to be expected. I mean, we've already been through a recession in the past 10 years, and we got out of it. So I think it's about time that people try and be like yourself. Yeah, even though you were on the Remain side, now you're trying to be a little bit more optimistic and see that there are more things that can come out of it and not just
Well, I just don't think it gets us anywhere. I just don't think, having the same argument about why you voted Remain, why you voted Leave, and how you are possibly incompatible is not helpful now that we have gone through the looking glass on this. We're the other side of it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that we should be taking a fresh view, because at the end of the day, we're going to have to live with this decision for the rest of our lives. So why keep on complaining about it and calling people in each other's camps racist, or they're not the right sort of person because they didn't agree with what you voted? Why can't we all just try and take this opportunity for change, for better, to change together?
Carla, I'm so glad you got stuck on the bus, because it allowed you to say some important things there. Thank you for your call. 0345 6060 973, the number you need to join the conversation. Simon is in Leatherhead. Afternoon, Simon.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, Tom. One of the other things I wanted to suggest, I've heard all the arguments, and while I sit probably halfway between the 16 and 17-year-olds and the wrinklies, I think, listening to...
I hope that people take that with the pinch of salt that it was meant.
Well, I mean, I'm using that as a sort of the generic term that people are referring to. The older voters. My parents would fall into the older category, and my children fall into the younger category and are unable to vote. But my big concern is that people didn't, were voting on emotion rather than economic sort of understanding, perhaps. People didn't appreciate quite what the market reaction would be in terms of interest rates and the stock market over the last 48 hours. But more important, I think people were probably voting irrationally in terms of what they thought they were doing, and the longer term implications of coming out.
So it was an irrational decision to vote to leave.
Well, I think for some people it was, and from the youth's perspective, you can understand why they're probably a little bit disgruntled, because they're now seeing things in the British press from people that voted Leave saying, "Oh, I didn't realise my vote would count. I didn't realise it had this sort of a reaction. If I could vote again, I wouldn't vote to Leave. I would vote to Remain." And that's probably where this idea of a second referendum, which I think is ridiculous, because if you have a referendum, you have to live with it.
Yes, I do.
And it might be a long-term opportunity, but I think the problem is that nobody had appreciated the short-term volatility that could be 5-10 years. Yes, 20, 30 years' time, it's great. But the next 10 years, that's where the youth are going to suffer.
But doesn't Carla's point speak to that? That, yes, 5-10 years is short to mid-term, but look beyond, look further, and try and make this work for us now that we are in it.
But that's easy to say. But for a 17-year-old who at that point will be 27 and will probably be well into his early part of his career, living through a recession or whatever it might be, it's a very difficult argument to swallow.
Well, I understand that, and as somebody who lost their job during the last recession, straight out of university, straight into a job, and then straight out again, thank you very much, I understand the frustration and the fear that goes with those kinds of descriptions of what we might be in for in the coming days. I wonder whether we are getting to the point now where we don't need to describe what each other might or might not be, given the vote that we made, whether it is irrational or odd or xenophobic or racist or status quo-y or tugging at the forelocks of prefect not to let us go anymore, as Boris's sister described a Remain vote. We just need to move on, get on with it, and try and paint a path or forge a path through this one, and coalesce around an idea that this could be good. This could be great. This could be an optimistic, tolerant, liberal new society, new Britain that works more for people than it does at the moment, which is why people voted against the status quo. Why would somebody who's lost their job, who's unemployed or working for low wages in the north of England, where some people already feel like they have been disregarded, why on earth would they vote for Remain ultimately? Sophie's in Wimbledon. Hi, Sophie.
Hi there.
Tell me about your voting. You're a young person who voted which way?
I voted Leave.
Why?
I was very unsure on the idea for a very long time. And going back to your argument of should 16, 17-year-olds been allowed to vote, I personally don't say should have been. For the fact that when I was 16, I don't feel like I'd have experienced enough of the world to even begin to contemplate trade and things like that were major issues.
But do you need to have experience? I mean, I've never run a business. I've never started up a business. I don't know what running a business would look like, and I can still understand an argument about business.
No, but like things
that would
like
be an argument for not having people who are perhaps below the age of about 40 voting.
Okay, but other things other than trade as well as that, I don't feel like I'd have experienced anything. I've never experienced politics properly. Like, I've never been in a job, paid taxes at that point in my life to even understand it properly.
But there might be some people at 21 who have never been in that position.
I do see your point. I voted leave on the fact that I am part of a family business and trade was a massive part of my reason to leave.
And again, did you find, Sophie, that you had problems explaining to people why you were voting leave?
Massively. About 90% of my friends were all strict Remainers. I can't believe what's happened. I want to leave the country. And I was like, you're being so dramatic. What has happened. You've just got to... We're a great country. We're Great Britain. We're going to continue to be great no matter which way this has gone. And a lot of people... That's
the fear, though, isn't it? That we've relegated ourselves, even in an afternoon, from the 5th greatest economy in the world to the 6th, and we're going to relegate ourselves even further if we don't get this renegotiation right.
There was a lot of people that were extremely angry about it, but they wouldn't even contemplate the fact that, like, we were evening ourselves back out again. The pound was starting to come back to normal. They just saw that, oh my God, the pound's dropped. They didn't even contemplate the fact it might start coming back up again. It was just a sudden, oh, this has happened. Oh, well, the world's ending. Well, no, it's not. The sun's still come up. You've still gone to work today. You still had your cup of tea. What's actually happened today to you that's different to what happened to you on Tuesday? Nothing.
At an individual level, I can understand that, although, as we've just heard in the last few minutes, things have gone a bit bad to worse for Lord Hill, at least, Britain's former European Commissioner. He's stepped down as a result of that vote. Sophie, thank you very much indeed. 0345 6060 973. Lots of you wanting to have your say on the issue of the generational divide when it comes to the Brexit vote. Of course, we will keep you up to date with any more breaking news as we get it here on LBC this afternoon. Independence Day +1. You're listening to Tom Swarbrick on LBC. The time, 12:46. Text 84850. Afternoon, Sarah. Tom, if the future of the country is in the hands of your last two young callers, then we are in safe hands, she says. I'm impressed. She signs off her text saying she is a little bit wrinkly. A text here from Jim in Mitcham. It seems very odd to describe a vote to effectively cut ourselves further away from our closest neighbours as a good thing. This is a wake-up call. The disconnect between the majority of the Westminster bubble and the majority of this country. We need to address this, says Jim. Labour especially has to address this. We're going to be hearing a little from Sadiq Khan in a few moments' time, what he has had to say, particularly that statement. I don't know if you saw it in the Maelstrom last night. He put out a statement saying that immigrants in this country, people who have come over to live and to work and to have families and all the rest of it, whatever it might be, that they are welcome, that this Brexit vote does not make them unwelcome. We're going to be discussing whether or not those people who may be impacted on by a Brexit vote because they are have come from overseas, whether they do still feel welcome in this country. A final tweet here. It says, now seeing the effects of the manipulated education system, many young truly believe life is easy and should always go their way. That tweet from Grumpy Old Man. Here's Tom in Reading. Hi, Tom.
Oh, hi there, mate. How you doing?
Yes, I'm very well. Your reaction to the vote, and as a young... because we've spoken before, as a young bloke yourself...
Yeah.
Which way did you go, and how big is this generational divide, do you think?
It's massive. It's absolutely humongous. You can't even describe the divide. I'll put this in the clearest perspective. I'll use the correct terminology, and I'll be as careful as I can with this. I'll try and be careful. I went into work on the day of the vote, and then I spoke to loads of other people. Especially, I deal with quite a lot of older customers from the work I work as.
Yeah.
And still really, really lovely people. They're probably the nicest people you'll meet. And then I'll go and speak to other people I've worked with previously in the past, and they say to me, I'm voting to leave. I said, why are you voting to leave? He said, immigration. And I go, okay, that's cool. If that's how you want to vote, that's fine. If that's an issue for you, and that hasn't been addressed by the Labour Party or the Tories, then vote how you want. The vote happened. I came in the morning, and I thought to myself, this is the general thought, and especially young people. I'm thinking the exact same thing every young person's thought who voted Remain. They thought, it won't affect you, it won't bother you. I went in that morning, and I came home, and I cried. I'm a 26-year-old man, and I cried when I got home. Every person I spoke to was older. The first thing they said to me is, good, we can get rid of these Negroes and these ragheads now. And I cried. I spent the entire day having to listen to people described like this. And I said to them, I did explain to them, I said, these ragheads...
Careful with that phrase, Tom.
I know, I apologise, but you have to understand what the conversation we're having now.
Those kinds of conversation, those kinds of views would have been had regardless of a Brexit vote. People have those kinds of views.
Because throughout this debate, Nigel Farage, no matter what anyone will say of older generation, because this is from their generation, not my generation, I grew up in secondary classes. I shared classes with Asian children, with black children, and do you know what? They're the most amazing people in the world. And when I rent an accommodation, I suffer the same problems as them. High rents, high housing costs, I suffer the same problems they do. The older generation don't understand nothing of what I've gone through in my life. When I was 16 years old, I went through the first recession. You know what happened to me the first day I got my job? They said, recession's gone. I'm sorry, mate, you've lost your job. And do you know what happened? The older generation, they didn't do nothing for me. And now I've got to this point now where I think, what should I care about the older generation now? They've taken away my housing. They don't care about my rental. Because you know what? They spent their pensions on housing. They spent it on my future. I have to live in poverty for the rest of my life because of their greed.
Do you feel that you are consigned to poverty because of the decisions of the baby boomers?
No, because the baby boomers have destroyed my life, and my girlfriend, I look at things differently from other people because I actually look at the facts and statistics and don't go with my heart. I actually look at things. And when I see the government say that the average house price in this country is £190, maybe £225, house prices in my area just hit £400,000. And you expect me to live like this? I haven't got a pension. I can't afford a pension. Let that sink in for a second. I can't afford a pension. When I hit 55 years old, there is no route for me other than to do the unthinkable, because there is nothing left for me. I will have to live on the street because there's no pension. I've got no backup, no savings, because at the moment, to get into I love this bit. When I went to vote, or when I get to rent with my girlfriend this week, we went to a letting agency. And the letting agency said to me, this is the fees we have to charge you. We have to charge you £1,000.
But Tom, this would have been the same in a Remain vote. This Brexit decision has had no bearing on that. There are problems in the housing market. Of course, there are problems with over-promising on pensions for our parents' generation. Of course there are. But that's not to say that the Brexit vote is the reason for all of it. We can't let Brexit arguably become the new EU and just be blamed for all our problems.
It has to be a section of it, because now, this is the thing that no one's thought about yet. Young people had one thing left to help them, and that was their human rights and their workers' rights, which is now under threat. You really think that the Tories, who caused the deaths of thousands of disabled people...
Look, Tom, I'm going to have to pick you up on that one, because having looked into those figures myself and having discussed it lots of times on this show, there is actually no proven causal link between those benefit cuts to those kinds of benefits that people receive, specifically the disability benefit allowance, and deaths. But I understand that those decisions made by the government have made things worse for a lot of people. And the argument that Jeremy Corbyn has been making time and time again is that the decision to castigate all immigrants for the problems that this country faces is putting the blame on the wrong people. The reason why the hospital is full and you cannot get a GP appointment is because hospitals have been closed down. Tom, we'll leave it there. Thank you for your call. Lots of people wanting to get on, as you can imagine. Kathy is in Mansfield. Hi, Kathy.
Hello, Tom.
What do you make of what Tom's just said there? I mean, that's quite a dispiriting, depressing view of the world.
It is, yes. Well, I am old. I did vote to leave, and I made my decision very carefully and thoughtfully with my children, grandchildren and great-grandchildren's future in view. And I've watched this from the beginning. At 16 years old, the National Health Service came into force.
Kathy,
we didn't have these things.
Kathy, address Tom's concerns then, and the concerns that are shared by a lot of young people at the moment, that this is a reckless decision made by a generation who aren't really going to be around to feel the consequences of it.
No, I don't agree with that. You will get an element of that, and I'm really sorry for the abuse that this young man took yesterday, because it certainly is not my view.
Well, here, Kathy, because I do think we've got ourselves into a situation where we describe all those people who voted to leave as somehow being close to racist or xenophobic, and all those people who voted for Remain as somehow being pandering to politicians and wanting the status quo, and it's just ridiculous. It's another example of how we've become incredibly binary and incredibly closed-minded.
Can I just say, Tom, it's not going to be easy. As the young lady said, give it 5 years. It will be a bit bumpy, but we don't need to divide at this time. We need to be tolerant and to understand each other, young, old, and in between, and to just keep calm and carry on. And I am sure that Britain will start to produce again, will become better, and won't be shackled. And the thing that I decided to vote out for was, it has been reported, the possible, down the road, federalisation of Europe, the possibility of having our taxes dealt with by the EU, and the continuing influx of people beyond a point that we can cope with. Our children can't get houses, etc. And I feel if you were having guests to stay and to stay over in your house as a person, you would make sure there was enough food and enough beds for them to sleep in.
Well, there's Kathy, thank you for your call. There are some wise words in there, I think, perhaps to allay some of the concerns that people are clearly feeling today about just the implication of this Brexit vote will actually mean. We'll continue to take your calls on the reaction to that vote. We want to find out a little bit more about what on earth is going to happen next in this new world that we wake up to today. We'll bring you the latest breaking news as we get it here on LBC, as we continue to react to these historic events. Afternoon to you, 1:03 is the time. Tom Swarbrick with you here on LBC. Huge reaction to that last hour. We'll continue to take your calls on the generational divide as a result of the Brexit vote, and I also want to look at and find, hopefully, some answers on what happens next. Boris and Michael Gove reportedly beginning to put together their big beasts for the Brexit team. We'll hear more from the current Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, as he seeks to reassure immigrants in this city, and I suppose more widely in this country, that they are welcome. Do you feel now less welcome? Is Britain for you now a less welcoming place if you have come here from overseas to live and to work? 0345 6060 973. We touched on it a little bit in the last 60 minutes or so, but isn't the irony that those who voted against our political elite because they don't trust them now have to trust them more, possibly, than they ever have done before, to get this renegotiation right? The Independent front page, I don't know if you've seen it this morning, but I think it absolutely nails it. It says, we've broken off with Europe, the PM has resigned, Nigel Farage is rampant, markets have crashed, Scotland wants another referendum, there are 52 trade deals to be renegotiated, and one man is favourite to be next Prime Minister. Welcome, it says, to Boris Island. Because it is in Boris that we are forced to trust. I just hope the opportunity we have is used to full effect here, and the divisions are healed, because there are clearly divisions. As we heard only a few moments ago, that those divisions are healed by using people from business, from civil service, from politics, from the health service, across the generations, to help in this renegotiation, that the 48% of you who didn't want to see this will be able to have a say as well. The question of what happens next is a huge one, but it's the only one we have absolutely no answers to right now. What actually is the plan? How do you disentangle 40-plus years of legal, trade, bureaucratic, constitutional red tape? Where do you even start? 0345 6060 973. A lot of calls today. In fact, there was breaking news this morning from this big meeting, particularly of the 6 founding members of the European Union, that they want to see Article 50 invoked now. Jean-Claude Juncker describing the divorce as not an amicable one. He wants to see Article 50 invoked now. Jeremy Corbyn said on the day of the vote he wants to see it invoked as soon as possible. Is that what you like to see? We just get on with it, we lift the pause button and we just get Article 50 written, done, out of the way, and we begin this 2-year process of taking ourselves out of the European Union. 0345 6060 973. 6 minutes past 1. Let's speak to Emran Mian, who is director of the Social Market Foundation, who has written on what will happen next following the vote to leave Europe. So hopefully has some ideas. Emran, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for coming in. What is going to happen next?
So I think the first stage of it has already happened, and Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of England, I think has done it quite skillfully and without making too much of a fuss about it. The Bank of England clearly pulled out a fair number of stops yesterday to help some of the slide in the markets be reversed. At one point we were seeing sterling having its biggest fall in 30 years. By the end of the day it recovered somewhat, and that was after Mark Carney had said that he was making available £250 billion to intervene in the markets.
I have to say, I did speak to a source at the Bank of England who said it was precisely his intervention that calmed everybody down, and those we did need those measured Canadian tones there to make sure that everyone was going to stay calm.
But even while the market on the whole did come back a bit, when you look at bank shares, for example, bank shares were down 15-20% on the day, and I think for me one of the real question marks that wasn't answered yesterday, and we'll see it unfold over the next week, is what does this mean for the strength of British banks? What does it mean for their access to funding, and what does that mean in turn for businesses being able to get hold of capital, banks continuing to keep lines of credit open for small businesses in particular, what we saw in 2008 after the financial crisis. And some of the symptoms on the markets yesterday were a bit like the financial crisis in 2008. We saw a real freezing up of those lines of credit for small businesses and indeed big businesses. I'm not predicting that's going to happen, but I think that's an open question for the moment.
I've still got Tom's voice ringing in my ears. If you missed Tom's call, we'll put it up on the website for you. Tom talking about being able to get a mortgage, trying to get a loan. Is that something that we're going to see become more difficult?
Well, I think there was a real question for me when the markets opened yesterday, and there was a big slide in sterling immediately as to what direction interest rates would then take, and whether the Governor of the Bank of England would be forced, whether the bank would be forced to put up interest rates as one of the ways in which to stop the bleeding for sterling. He hasn't had to do that, and we've got to very much hope that he doesn't have to make that kind of intervention, because if interest rates go up, then people's mortgage payments go up, and the uncertainty that people are already feeling about the economy just multiplies. So I'm very much hoping that we're not going to see those kinds of measures. And actually, on the evidence of yesterday, it seems like we can probably get through it using the other measures that the Bank of England has.
The short term, then, that's the short term. Medium term, in the next 2 to 5 years.
I think medium term economically, the big question now is what are businesses thinking in terms of their decisions about investing in the UK? So I was chatting to the new managing director of an American business yesterday morning, and he was saying that they were planning to make a big expansion of their presence in the UK. That's now obviously on hold. And he had a number of letters of intent from British customers, big British customers who were going to start buying their services in a big way, and he simply doesn't know at this stage if they're going to go ahead with those. Now, businesses will be sitting down over the next few weeks and thinking about this stuff. They'll be thinking about how much of an economic hit is there, how much should it change to their decision making. But I think we've all now got to live with the uncertainty that some of these businesses will decide not to invest in the UK. Some will think about moving some of their operations elsewhere, and that obviously has an effect on incomes. It has an effect on jobs.
And is that going to ultimately, in your eyes, reduce the power of London's financial centre, the financial centre of Europe, arguably of the world?
So the biggest risk for London is definitely around financial services, that's for sure. So for at the moment, financial institutions are able to be based in London but trade all across Europe. And because even though we're not part of the Eurozone, our financial services get passported across the EU. I think it's a very real risk now that won't continue to be the case. And if that's no longer the case, then some of these businesses will want to move.
Emran, stay there if you would. Let's bring in Professor Alastair Bruce, OBE, who is a constitutional expert. Afternoon to you, Professor Bruce.
Good afternoon.
Can you begin to try and disentangle constitutionally the UK from the EU? Where to start?
Well, luckily it won't be my responsibility. The decision having been taken by the government of the day to hold a national referendum is quite interesting because we are a parliamentary democracy, and on the whole we haven't lent on referenda very often in our history. But it's quite clear that as a democracy, a line has been drawn in the sand by the people of the United Kingdom, and Parliament must now react. But we know that it is an issue whereby the executive, that is the Prime Minister and Cabinet ultimately are the executive of the country. They've been given the instruction by the people, and the Prime Minister has said that he doesn't want to start the process now. And so I think it's really going to be interesting next week, where the firmament of real power now is, which is the House of Commons, will put pressure on the Prime Minister or not on how quickly we get involved. But we've had that pressure already from Europe.
Well, yes, I was just going to say we've seen Jean-Claude Juncker only this morning say that he thinks we should just be getting on with it. The 6 founding members of the EU saying, come on, invoke Article 50, let's get on with this. How much can they actually make a decision? Surely it's now our decision about whether we start Article 50 or not.
Well, my mother once wisely said, ask not what people say, but ask yourself, why do they say it? Now, what's happening from Europe is they're desperately keen, I would imagine, to try and make sure that this view that Britain has taken does not move across the other countries. Yes. And that's why they want us to get out fast. And they also have said it's not going to be very friendly, this divorce, because they don't want any of the other countries to think there's any advantage in leaving. So the pressure that they can bring, though, is quite considerable because it's negotiatory. And they might start to say, well, we'll deal with you better if you start now. But in the end, it's up to the House of Commons and its relationship with the executive of the day, which is the Prime Minister and the Cabinet.
Let me just bring Emran back in. Emran, from a business point of view then, who is best placed, do you think, to start this renegotiation or to show a strong hand to Brussels, who might not necessarily want to cede much ground?
I think the real challenge for the UK here is there's a real schism, there's a real divide in the Leave side as well about how they want to conduct this negotiation. So there's a bunch of people in the Leave side who actually would be pretty happy with the free trade deal with the EU, and they would accept, quite high levels of immigration and quite, basically open borders, free movement, as the price of having a free trade deal. So they don't particularly want to reduce immigration. They want to keep free trade going. They want to come out of the EU for other reasons. Now, there's that side of the Leave debate, and that's people like Daniel Hannan and Boris Johnson. Some people say is kind of basically on that side of the argument. But then there's a different side of the argument. Obviously most represented by Nigel Farage, which says there's absolutely no way we would accept a future deal which involves high levels of immigration that involves anything like open borders, and that's a really, really big divide that exists in the Leave side, and they've left it there on purpose through the campaign because resolving it during the campaign was impossible. But it now does have to be resolved, but they won't be in any hurry to resolve it because that's a really difficult one.
Well, I'm going to ask Professor Bruce the same unfair question, but I'll ask you first, Emran. When do you think Article 50 is going to be set off?
So my prediction would be I think we'll now have a Tory leadership election. Obviously, we know that. I think different candidates for the Tory leadership election will have to go into that with different stances on how the UK would behave. So I think what we'll probably see is a kind of a small L Liberal candidate who's happy with free trade, who's happy with some level of free movement. And then I think we'll see a candidate who wants more closed borders. And that, they'll fight it out in front of an electorate of Tory activists. And we'll see what happens.
And until we get that, it won't
I don't think Article 50 will be evoked until after we've got a new Prime Minister.
And Professor Bruce, as you were saying, that's perfectly possible because we're now in control of when we start it.
I completely agree that we will now see our Prime Minister make a decision, whoever that Prime Minister is. And I think that the difficulty is that Europe will want it to be quick. And although Article 50 claims that there's a 2-year process, I think Europe will try and negotiate us to conclude that much quicker. But, of course, Britain won't want any less days than the full 2 years to conclude.
And we should also remember that Article 50 is just about how we leave the EU. Having a new trade deal with the EU, that's a separate matter. So first we have to do the deal to come out, and then we have to do the deal on trade. And there might be a big gap between the two.
Well, look, this is, as I was saying, this is day one. So it's baby steps at this stage. Thank you both very much indeed. Professor Alastair Bruce, constitutional expert, and Emran Mian, director of the Social Market Foundation, who has written about, and you have heard him talk about, what might happen next following the vote to leave. Over to you, 0345 6060 973. What do you want to see happen next? Do you think that 3 months is too long for David Cameron to wait to stand down, that we should just get a new government in place, we should get a new Prime Minister in place, we should begin perhaps talking about a general election, maybe, and then get Article 50 underway? I can tell you that David Cameron is currently in Cleethorpes for the National Armed Forces Day. Anything he says will, of course, update you here on LBC First. You're listening to Tom Swarbrick on LBC. The time is 1:15. David Cameron currently watching armed forces personnel marching in front of him in Cleethorpes. Of course, his decision yesterday to resign has prompted speculation about a new Prime Minister. That will be decided by the Tory party, of course, the Conservative Party members. There are about 150,000 of them. That is something that we can discuss, of course, when it comes to discussing what reaction you want now, what you want to see happen next. We've spoken a lot, haven't we, about Article 50 and beginning the formal 2-year process of getting this underway. You can understand why European leaders would be keen to see that got underway as soon as possible. Personally, as someone of a nervous disposition who likes to have all his ducks in a row before setting off on a big event, I'd like to think that we can get some things organised first before we start getting on with Article 50. I think we do need to know who the next Prime Minister is going to be, frankly, before we make any decisions about when or how we're going to leave the EU. 0345 6060 973, the number you need to join the conversation. Josh is in Fulham to kick us off. Afternoon, Josh.
Afternoon, Tom. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. These are extraordinary times.
Very much so, very much so. And it's quite interesting, actually. I mean, sort of hearing your previous caller, I think the chap from sort of about 10, 15 minutes ago, who was clearly very, very upset. And
Tom,
feels Tom, he feels completely marginalised by what's happened, even more so probably than actually I think he felt before this referendum.
For those listeners who didn't hear Tom, he described in great detail the circumstance that he found himself at work following the Leave vote, where the coarseness of the language, particularly around people who came here from other countries or people who have parents from other countries who were born here, the language coarsening. And I just hope that we can all agree that that is a coarsening of language that is unacceptable before, during and after any vote, anywhere, ever.
Correct. I mean, from my side, I'm actually no different in terms of age. I'm 27, and my mother is German and holds a German passport and has never got a British passport, but my father is British, and she actually wanted to vote out. If she had the opportunity, she would have voted out. And it's really interesting. I mean, I find that on Facebook and any social media, you find that actually what's quite interesting, the people that wanted to vote to remain were all about not being divisive, and being inclusive, and sort of really trying to accentuate the idea of a community feel, hence the reason why they wanted to stay with the Union. What is quite interesting, now that the decision has not gone that way, it is exactly that divisiveness that they wanted to prevent.
Josh, I'm so sorry. I know you want to make a really good point. I'm really interested, but I'm struggling to hear you. I think your phone sounds like it's moving, swinging away and back again towards your mouth. So we'll try and sort out the phone line and maybe get you back up. But as you can imagine, a lot of people are trying to get on the air this afternoon. Nathaniel's in West Norwood. Afternoon, Nathaniel.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm well, sir. What are you going to tell me about what you want to see next? Should Article 50 be triggered as soon as possible?
No, do you know what? I think now's the time for calm. I think everybody needs to just have a cup of tea, a scone.
A scone, maybe some Pims. Let's get some Pims involved as well. Let's turn it into a totally British event.
Correct. Because at the end of the day, you know what? It's very interesting about I appreciate and understand young people's concerns, but I also, we're always a product of our history. And I think that you can look at it from one side and see the doom and gloom, but then you can also see that this is actually a great opportunity for the youth to actually... sorry, I'm in a windy area, so hopefully it doesn't affect
That's all right.
What I'm saying. It's an opportunity for the youth to actually stamp their print on Britain's future and the way that we go forward.
Yeah.
The EU, it was, at the end of the day, you can't argue with the result. It was the electorate that decided. It's a democracy that everybody strives for. We go into, I'm not saying we've invaded countries, but we've gone into other countries to try to provide this type of democracy. So you can't be hypocritical and say, we wanted a referendum, we've got the referendum, it's not my way, and now I don't want that, I want something else. That's
and Nathaniel, I totally agree, and we need, there has to be a way of putting aside the differences that the campaign brought out. There has to be a way of putting them aside now and saying, right, let's just get on with it.
That's it. What's done is done, and at the end of the day, the funny thing is, it's people are saying it's either, it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't, but what I'm looking at is this. if you look at it, I mean, I did my research. That's why I voted Leave, because I did research on TTIP, and also I looked at the attitude of the European Union towards David Cameron when he went there. He went to Europe asking for a roast dinner with a few trimmings, and came back with a couple of wet sandwiches and some soggy crisps. And then he tried to sell that idea to the UK nation, and then expected everybody to gobble that up. And then the UK public asked for a referendum. We vote out, and then everyone's complaining. Like, all I'm saying to everybody is, like, we're out. Let's calm down. Let's look at what's going on. Political divides all need to just sit down and relax. Let's go forward and work out how we're going to take on, this humongous opportunity to not to make our country great, but to have some independence. Really make an influence in the world. That's my that's what I would say.
And it's absolutely critical that those people who were so central to taking us out, or to hammer home the message about why we should leave, it is critical that they are, one, given the time in order to try and work out what we're going to do. Because let's be honest, I don't think anybody is quite totally 100% clued up on what happens next. So they've got to be given time to do it. They've also they've clearly got a mandate to do it, but they've also got to be trusted in to do it in the best interests of the British people. And that's an interesting discussion to have, given that trust in politicians was arguably, in fact, inarguably, one of the reasons why so many people voted out. Nathaniel, thank you for your call. Raheem is in Neasden. Hi, Raheem.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
No worries, sir. Article 50 now or not?
Definitely not now.
When? When then?
Just like your previous caller, even though I voted to stay, he voted to leave, I think we're both on the same page here. We need to actually think about what we're going to do next. You don't go and negotiate straight away. We need to make sure that the 48% that weren't necessarily, or we didn't get our own way, we need to make sure that we're fairly represented in terms of what agreements we want out of this, because we clearly wanted to stay, therefore we should try and negotiate something and ensure that, we have our cake as well.
Well, Nathaniel was calling for scones a little earlier. Either way, we're going to get some baked goods.
Definitely, very British bake.
and this level-headedness that we now see and emanated, started to emanate, I think, from the Prime Minister yesterday, and then came from Mark Carney, particularly with regard to the markets. That level-headedness is now absolutely crucial. We do not need people herring off into Europe to say we demand this, that and the other.
No, definitely not. I think, if anything, I can't remember the EU, the one that's saying that we should leave straight away.
Mr. Juncker, yeah.
Yes, Mr. Juncker. Mark Carney, beautiful speech in terms of trying to calm everyone down and say, well, you know what, we have this, we've prepared, we've got, a sum of money for this contingency. Yeah. Mr. Juncker's, trying to force us, and I think he's trying to do that because he wants the best deal. We may make a brash decision, just like, how we did with Google in terms of, not cutting a better deal for that tax. Sorry, lost for words here.
Well, look, I think there are going to be plenty of people who are in positions, no offence, Raheem, of higher office who are going to be lost for words at the moment. When then? If not now, when do you think would be a right moment? Post a Tory leadership election? Post a general election? When?
I think post the Tory leadership, post the Tory leadership, maybe not necessarily a general election, because I think the next one is a couple of years away. But
it can be. There has to be a bit of jiggery pokery, but they can bring in another one if they feel that there is no democratic mandate for the person who is elected to run the country, who will be decided by those Conservative Party members to actually do the job. And yes, there has to be some tinkling around the edges of the law because of that fixed-term Parliament law, but we can have one. And I think ultimately we are probably, on the balance of probability, we are going to have one in the next year, maybe two. So we've had a referendum campaign. We may well have another referendum campaign in Scotland, and we might have another general election as well. Hope everybody's had enough sleep. Raheem, thank you. Louise is in Brent. Hi, Louise.
Hi there.
Article 50, yes or no now?
I voted to go out.
Yes.
And I just wanted to explain my reasons. Is that what the question is?
Well, no. The question is on Article 50. And whether or not you believe that the renegotiation process should happen now. And there are plenty of people who have their own reasons for voting leave or voting remain. We're past that now.
Right, okay. So the question is, the article is, should we go out or should we just...
Can I ask a question that isn't meant to sound offensive? When you voted leave, did you know what Article 50 was?
I wasn't. I've read up on things on the internet and stuff like that, but that's not something that I've looked into. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It wasn't, so I'll just be straight up from the start.
Well, no, I appreciate that. So you voted leave, but you weren't aware of how it might happen, what it might look like, who it might involve.
Not the ins and outs, I've got to be honest. I did do a lot of reading, though, on the internet, because my job entails me to do that.
Right.
But I did, as I said, voted out for other reasons, not just on that.
And again, this isn't a question that's meant to sound demeaning in any way. Do you think you voted leave with your eyes as open as they possibly could be to what leave would look like?
I think a lot of the people who voted leave had no choice. This is all we had to hang on to. I think some of the people that did vote to leave are so desperate. And I think it was just, we had no choice.
And that desperation is caused entirely by the EU?
Not entirely, that would be wrong for me to say.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, in my shoes, living in Brent, and one of being Brent a lot of people who live in Brent will also, I know it wasn't the highest areas of votes, but what's going on at the moment has hit my family quite bad in the last...
And you're talking about the immigration issue, I assume?
A part of it, yes. I'm going to be honest, yes.
And do you feel that those people who have come into Brent over the last few years to live, to work, to do whatever, do you feel that, because Sadiq Khan put a message out yesterday saying that they should feel welcome, do you believe that they now feel as welcome as they did this time 2 days ago?
Oh, yes, because I spoke to some neighbours yesterday and they came over to me, we had a chat. And they're from Poland themselves, and they were absolutely fine. They're actually singing as they come out. I don't think it's made a difference to them whatsoever.
Well, we'll have to wait and see whether it will make a difference to them whatsoever. And, of course, the problem about going into this not really knowing how it's going to formulate later on down the line is whether or not those people are going to be able to stay in the country, or if they are able to stay, under what circumstances they are going to be able to stay in the country. Louise, thank you for your call. 0345 6060 973. I told you we might not expect a lot of answers to the question, what is going to happen next, but we can certainly decide amongst us what you think should be involved in happening in the short to medium term, particularly when it comes to the legally binding Article 50. Nothing about the EU referendum, I'm afraid, was legally binding. Article 50 changes that picture. There are calls today for it to be invoked now. Those calls from the European Union, unsurprisingly. I want to know whether you agree with it. 0345 6060 973. News time now, 1:31. Your headlines, Simon Conway. Mike in York has asked some good questions on 84850. Have we really crossed the point of no return? Does the referendum outcome not have to be ratified by the House of Commons before Article 50 is applied, says Mike. I told you this was going to be an hour when we had more questions than answers. Let me just bring to you a couple of lines from a blog that I've tweeted. It's by a man called David Green, who's a barrister who's looked into electoral law very, very carefully. He writes the Jack of Kent blog. It's extremely good. I would advise you to read it. It's on my Twitter feed at the moment, at Tom Swarbrick1. I'll just read a quick line from that to you about what Article 50 would mean, the triggering of it, and at when and how that should happen. He says this, having looked into electoral law: the fact is that the longer the Article 50 notification is put off, the greater the chance it will never be made at all. This is because the longer the delay, the more likely it will be that events will intervene or excuses will be contrived. There are circumstances in which Article 50 might actually not happen. Jeremy's in Belsize Park. Afternoon, Jeremy.
Good afternoon, Tom, and I need to thank you because you have given me an idea that was probably sort of germinating somewhere in my mind. And that is to start a serious campaign to encourage people to join the Tory party so that they can be part of the electorate for the new leader, so that they can influence the choice in a Euro-friendly fashion.
So this is akin to what people did, I suppose some of the Labour MPs would see it, in the Labour membership election, where they registered for their £3 and they scuppered the majority opinion in the Labour Party by getting Jeremy Corbyn voted in, and you would say, let's do the same for the Conservative Party. What are their rules of entry? Isn't it? It's £25 to join, I thought.
I think there are ways of making it easier for people to join.
So this is now an open period of backstabbing that's going on by Jeremy in Belsize Park to try and affect the leadership vote, and therefore, Jeremy, you would say Article 50.
I wouldn't indeed. I wouldn't characterise it as backstabbing at all, Tom. I would characterise it as harnessing the power of the million people so far who have started a petition and encouraging them. I mean, you can look to Momentum as an equivalent, but I think Momentum actually has got an awful lot of things wrong. The point being that this is not going to be an extremist campaign. This is going to harness the power of the passionately centrist who do not want to see Britain suffer as a result, because, of course, suffering economically means suffering in all those other ways. And if we are to stand a chance of people saying, Britain is great, brackets possibly even without Scotland, close bracket, then we need the best possible deal so that public services can be maintained, so that, all those other knock-on effects, which will, of course, affect the better off in London, but they'll affect the others in the northeast and around the rest of the country a damn sight more. So the answer is to have a vote. And yes, there might be a bit of money involved, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if I can't unearth a number of people with quite a lot of money to get this message out and to somehow or other bring that influence to bear.
Jeremy, you have also put an idea in my head that has been germinating for some time, and I think I've got a way around doing what you're describing, and the way around that is just very simply to hold a general election.
Well, yes, but...
you allow the Conservative Party in whatever form to pick the person that they see fit as being someone who would be able to win a general election standing on a Brexit platform, and then you've got a decision to be made, particularly in the Labour Party, about putting up a candidate or sticking with Jeremy Corbyn who would stand on a pro-EU ticket, and those are now the dividing lines.
I think the dividing lines are a hell of a lot. I understand what you're saying, Tom, but I think the dividing lines are so complex.
Yes.
And don't forget that the majority of MPs were in favour of remaining, and across party lines. There may be more Tory rebels than Labour rebels, but and yes, I think it would be very helpful for the Labour Party to elect Hilary Benn, let's say. And part of my brain thinks anybody except Corbyn, but and they're probably not going to go with Amuna, but they could well go with Hilary Benn as a sort of unity candidate, and that would be helpful. But I don't know whether the timing works. I think it's important to keep up the momentum started by those million people who've joined that petition, and there will be more. Of course, that petition is meaningless unless there are 17 million people who sign up to it. It's all it does is it gets things started. And I go with the general election route, but it's not going to happen immediately. And some of the argument needs to happen beforehand, and in case it doesn't happen.
Jeremy, we've exchanged ideas. I like it. I think there is going to be a great body of people, as you say, those million people that have already signed that petition calling for a second referendum on this issue, who might take up your idea of trying to join the Conservative Party in order to have their voice heard when it comes to them electing their next leader. Lawrence is in Colchester. Afternoon, Lawrence.
Oh, good afternoon to you. Interesting debate going on.
We are heading down the rabbit hole, my friend, but I think under these circumstances we are having to.
Yes. I was saying to your colleague just before I came on, I've worked on building sites since 1975, and I found it hard to get work in London because of the cheap labour from Eastern Europeans. Now, before I carry on saying what I want to say, which is a realism, my first wife was Jamaican and she died 12 years ago.
I'm sorry.
I brought up it's okay, it's cancer. I brought up 3 girls and a boy from 10 years old, and they're all doing very well. Now, when my wife and I were courting in the 70s, racism was rampant, and it was on both sides. Why are you going out with the white so-and-so? Why are you going out with the black so-and-so? And we suffered immensely, but we got through it, and we just thought they were idiots. Moving on from that, my children and I are very successful in what we do. that the racism towards Eastern Europeans is not called for. And I put my point of view over on site yesterday with the silly comments that were being said to some of the lads from Eastern Europe. We've got your bus fare home here. Do you want it? And stuff like that. I said, what are you talking like that for? This is pathetic. Oh, we're only having a laugh. I said, there's no need for it. I said, it's not their fault. This problem that's occurred from Europe is down to politicians. It wasn't fought over. They're all middle-class politicians. They're all born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and they did not have a points system. Tony Blair's the one to blame for this, and this is why the Labour Party is on its knees.
Well, Lawrence, I mean, blame is something that people are increasingly looking towards in order to find answers to big questions. And I think, as you rightly point out, the blame attached to those people who are just looking to come over to try and make a bit of money in order to better their lives, the blame on them is putting it on the wrong person. And I'm grateful to you for having said that you called people out on it, because I think more of that is needed.
It is. But the realism of the problem is that British workers have been undercut by conglomerate building firms that are run by the banks, and the banks are run by the cities for shareholders to make more profit. Doesn't matter about the working class people of this country, whether they're black, yellow or white. Their standard of living has dropped.
And part of the reason, of course, why so many people in so many areas that can be described as in working class areas voted to leave. Lawrence, thank you for your call. Tristan is in Greenwich. Hi, Tristan.
Morning, Tom. Oh, afternoon. We were going into Article 50. I'm one of these people that we need to take a deep breath, I think, before we enact it. I don't want to rush it, and history has proved that when Britain leaves countries or organisations, we always do it wrong. Look at the Middle East, look at parts of Asia. So
yes, there's going to be an inquiry into what our exit strategy is that will take years and years and years.
And also, if we do it wrong, we can't then go back and say, sorry, we want to renegotiate our renegotiation. And we'll be here in 5-10 years' time, still having a political civil war, saying, you negotiated us out wrongly, you shouldn't have voted us out. And the guys that did the negotiation will have all retired. The politicians and the negotiators will have gone. So we've got to get it right, and we've got to get it right first time. So I think we take a deep breath, do all the soul searching we've got to do, then get around a table and just unpick it in the best interest of both the EU and the UK.
And who do you trust to do that? Who do you trust to unpick it in the best interests for you, your family, my family, everyone's families?
Well, I think if you look at things like your own personal circumstances, so you have a dispute at work or you have a trade dispute or whatever, you don't get the people involved in the dispute to do the negotiation. I would look at like Australia or America or somebody else to sort of come in and do a bit of mediation and arbitrary between the parties. Because what's going to happen is they want us to invoke Article now, and I'm going to think, because I'm a Brexiter, oh, here we go, they're telling us what to do again. So I think we should have some sort of independent body that we can sort of both go to and sort of say, how would this look on the global side of it, rather than what's best for me, mate, and what's best for you, mate.
The idea, and we heard it on, I don't know if you were listening to David and Michael earlier, the idea of Boris going to Europe to try and do a renegotiation, given what he said about Europe with those very people that he's talked about in this campaign, is going to be really, really, really tricky.
I know, I mean, you look at things like, I know it's talking about wars and stuff, but the UN and that, you can't be the ground troops and the peacekeeper.
So we need an independent body to negotiate on behalf of the British people our renegotiation or exit from the EU.
I agree, yeah, with input from both Britain and the EU.
And
so that we're not looking at it in 5-10 years' time and saying we got it wrong and infighting would just carry on for generations.
I think that's a really sensible move, and I think it would be beneficial in the climate that we're in now for that independent body, whatever way you want to call it, I think to be cross-party, cross-platform, to include those people who wanted to remain in the EU as well as those who wanted to leave, in order that you can have a wide range of views to bring about the best result for this country, for Tristan's family, for my family and for yours. 0345 6060 973. Text here from Jeremy on 84850. For those of you who still have that idea germinating in your heads, he says, Tom, it costs £5 for under-23s to join the Conservative Party. We'll take more of your calls after the travel update. You're listening to Tom Swarbrick here on LBC. The time, 1:45. Straight to your calls. Michael's in West Hampstead. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Tom.
Article 50, sir. Clearly, the general perception is, from those people who I've spoken to so far, this is a time for cool heads, a cup of tea. Let's see where we are in how long? 3 months after the Tory party election?
Yes, possibly even a general election. But I don't think it should just be the Tories who are choosing our way forward in Europe. I think all the party leaders, the current party leaders, including Jeremy Corbyn, if he's not voted out, should sit down around the big table, knock out how they all see how we should progress forward in a non-involvement in Europe, or as it were, to battle out a deal. Because if one particular party, say the Conservatives, go in and go alone and say, well, this is what we want, blah, 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 it's going to be the age-old where we come back and, well, the Labour will say, well, we didn't want this, we didn't want that. Or
what we've got, Michael, is a situation, sorry to cut across you, but what we've got is a situation where those people who say, I voted because I don't trust the politicians anymore, I don't trust the political class, I don't trust the establishment, which is an argument I can completely understand, but by voting that way, they are now putting arguably the most power they've ever had back into the people that they've already described as not being able to trust.
I agree.
Did you do that? Did you vote to leave?
I voted to leave, yes.
Yeah. And I mean, we can get into whether that is a contradiction. It doesn't matter because we're through it anyway and we're here now. But we have to be able, don't we, to look at the people who are negotiating on behalf of the UK and say, we believe that you are doing the best job possible.
At the end of the day, it's quite funny because it's the same people who put them in there in the first place. They voted them in as MPs in their local constituencies. So it's up to them to, if there's a general election, either vote them out, vote somebody else in new, who they think that maybe be able to do a better job. I mean, throughout the world, I mean, who trusts a politician, to be honest?
Well, yeah, that's partly, of course, I'm sure historians will view this moment as part of the reason behind it, that the trust in politicians was so low that this was possible. Let me confront this problem then by trying to be optimistic. Is this not a great opportunity to show a more unified politics to the electorate and say, from across parties, across platforms, across the Brexit or Remain divide, here are a group of people who are going to coalesce around the idea that they want to make Britain better by having a better leave from the EU. They want to make that process as painless as possible.
Yeah, I mean, for my children, I'm quite excited. I mean, this has happened in a way, and apprehensive in another. But yes. I think it's exciting times, and I think we should embrace it. Okay, we have to let the politicians do what they do, but I think with local surgeries, you can go to your MPs, go and tell them how you feel, what you want. So they can feed back into their leaders and say, well, this is what we're asking for.
Do you feel, Michael, sorry, I'm trying to push on because there are so many people wanting to have their say, but do you feel that this vote has closed the gap, the perceived gap between the electorate and their elected officials? That you could walk into your MP surgery because you have had the same impact that they have had in this vote?
Well, yeah, of course, everybody has a right to walk into the surgery and say what they want. It's like the people who didn't vote on this referendum, and then they want to speak afterwards. To put your vote in, say to put your hand up and say, well, this is what I voted for. You know, those who didn't vote are now saying, well, yeah, I should have gone and voted.
Well, I think I have to say, if you're not going to vote in this. It's hard to see how you would ever engage in politics ever. Michael, thank you for your call. Ian is in Welwyn. Hi, Ian.
Hello. So I actually did read Article 50 before I voted.
Good man.
Mostly because everyone kept going on about it, and I kind of wanted to know what it was. And it's very, very short. It's 5 paragraphs, 3 of which are one sentence each. I mean, 4 of which are one sentence each. It says almost nothing. All it says is that if a member state decides to go, then the union will negotiate and conduct an agreement, and it will be agreed by qualified majority voting. not by consent of every single member of the group. So effectively, so long as we can negotiate successfully with, say, Portugal, who are usually on our side anyway, the Spanish, who don't really care, the French and the Germans, we're probably okay. And then at the 2-year point is not actually a hard cut-off, because if there is a unanimous agreement of all of the member states plus the leaving country, then the timeline can be extended past 2 years. So that's the fact. That's what it actually says.
So we still have to be really careful with the EU. We can't just go in all guns blazing and say, right, we want this, that and the other, because we have to negotiate this, hopefully a unanimous vote for Article 50 in order that we can maybe extend the time.
Well, the sword of Damocles that hangs over the negotiations is that if we don't reach agreement by the end of 2 years, whether it's an agreement to extend or an agreement to, on everything else, all the treaties then cease immediately. And that's where it gets a bit awkward. But I think the point at the moment, I mean, your question about should we invoke Article 50 now or wait, I think there are a few important things here. I think the first thing is with David Cameron's resignation. I think he's right. I think we shouldn't invoke Article 50 until we have a new Prime Minister. I think that would be wrong.
A new Prime Minister elected by party members or elected by the country?
Well, do you know, the Labour Party were quite happy when it was Gordon Brown taking over from Tony Blair.
Well, the Labour Party was. I'm not sure the country was.
Well, but that is the system we have. I mean, we don't like first past the post, except for nobody can think of anything better that would actually work. We don't much like, a lot of things. I mean, I don't much like the way my council does bin collections, but I don't have a better idea for how to do it. So there's plenty of things that people just will whinge and moan about, but are really quite complicated. So I think it's the system we have. It's the system that works. It is a parliamentary democracy. We don't vote for a president or a monarch. I mean, well, you wouldn't vote for a monarch anyway, but you know what I mean. We don't vote for a constitutional leader. So that is the way it is, and that's the way we have to deal with it. But I think the point about the negotiation at this point is that what we've actually done as a country, I think, is we've said to the European Union, look, one of the biggest reasons that we want to leave is because we don't want you to keep telling us what to do against our will. We really don't like it very much. The first reaction from Juncker is, you now must do this, because I say so. And I think the absolute basis of any negotiation in anything in life is not to start off being pushed around.
Well, this goes back to the call a little earlier, doesn't it? That those people who are involved in a dispute should not be the people who are involved in the negotiation after the dispute, because blood pressures are too high. And I think you're right to say that it is worrying, looking at what's being said in Brussels at the moment to an EU exit, that we would get any consensus around a table when it comes to negotiating Article 50. Ian, thank you very much indeed. Nick's in Hertford. Hi, Nick.
Hello, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I have voted actually to remain, but having accepted that, the outcome, my personal opinion is that we need to invoke Article 50 as soon as possible.
Why?
Mainly because the uncertainty is affecting our economy. And secondly, when we heard Mark Carney saying that they have taken all steps to shore up any impact on financial institutions, that means to me more quantity easing. Now, we have got a bill to pay of 2.1 trillion already, so I think people need to start focusing that the clock is ticking, more money is put into the economy, and it's, at the end of the day, it's the people who are going to pay for that debt.
And actually, the greatest concern is not that we've got a period of time in which to put a leader in charge and to have a party decide who's going to run it, but that the uncertainty in the market just being elongated even more might cause problems in people's pockets.
Absolutely, and I think you will find that the markets will decide at the end how long we've got to start really negotiating and working on the exit issues.
But nevertheless, you feel it possible and sensible to invoke Article 50 now, even though we don't have a sitting Prime Minister in 3 months' time?
Well, we can still get the civil service to start looking at Article 50 and start putting together the various scenarios and options that we have. And in the meantime, we're going to have somebody actually replacing Mr. Cameron just before October. My personal opinion is that we need to go for elections soon after that.
A general election?
Yes, I would think so. I think it does make sense.
I have to agree with you, because you can imagine a set of circumstances where a Conservative leader is elected and they go into the House of Commons and they start losing votes and they start feeling that the support isn't even there within the Conservative Party, given that lots of people were campaigning for Remain. You look at a resurgent Labour Party, perhaps with someone replacing Jeremy Corbyn, and you think surely there has to be a point at which the public come in to make the ultimate decision. Nick, thank you. Bruno is in Guildford. Hi, Bruno.
Hi, hello, how are you?
I'm well, sir. What are you going to tell me about Article 50?
Well, first, thank you very much for having me on the show.
Never a problem.
I'm fairly unfamiliar with the untested Article 50 and what it actually means in detail. I know what it means. But I just would like to make a kind of a plea to British politicians that, I'm an EU migrant. I've been in this country for 13 years. And I think I've made a very positive contribution to British society as much as I can. But I know that the rest of the continent is very apprehensive about this situation, and it was totally in shock for the past 24 hours.
Well, it's interesting it's interesting that you should ring, Bruno, because we're going to be discussing this after the news at 2. Actually, is that vote, that Brexit vote, has that made you feel less welcome here in a place that you call home, that is your home?
I think, my fear is more about perception and how my children with their exotic names are going to be perceived in the future, because I don't know what it's going to be like when you have, the wide discourse to the wider public of people from Nigel Farage. One does start to think, is this a new wave of Farage, Trump, etc., that are trying to inject a certain mentality of fear in terms of differentiation, rather than exploring what Joe Cox so much valued in terms of what we all have in common, what we all share. But to answer your question, in practical terms, no. I mean, Guildford voted in. I have lots of British friends, and I've always been very welcome in this country. I do feel, however, that the reason that brought me here is gone. And so it kind of makes, the whole this debate the last 3 or 4 weeks, and this is not about me or migrants, it's about what British people choose for the future of the country.
Well, and it's a shame, Bruno, that you haven't been able to have a say, given that you haven't been here long enough to have a say, because, of course, this is your home, this is somewhere you work and live and bring up your family. It is also an issue that Sadiq Khan has been speaking about.
There are almost 1 million Europeans in London, Londoners, and my message to them is you're welcome.
He issues a statement telling those Europeans in London not to panic, that they are welcome here. I want to hear from you if you are, like Bruno, a European in this city, in this country, who perhaps today doesn't feel as welcome. On 3 minutes past 2 is the time. Tom Swarbrick with you, leading Britain's conversation. If you've just joined us this afternoon, where on earth have you been? We've seen Britain's Commissioner to the EU resign. We've heard Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn talk about his future and Britain's future.
The government must now take steps to stabilise the economy, to protect jobs, pensions and wages. Labour will not allow any instability to be paid for by the working people of this country.
Nicola Sturgeon wants a new Scottish relationship with Brussels.
To ensure that that option is a deliverable one in the required timetable, steps will be taken now to ensure that the necessary legislation is in place.
David Cameron is in Cleethorpes for National Armed Forces Day. If he speaks, you will hear him on LBC. I want to talk this hour about the statement put out by London's Mayor Sadiq Khan to reassure Europeans in London, but of course this can go much further afield than London, that they are welcome here and that they are wanted and needed here as a result of that Brexit vote. We heard from Bruno just before the news there at 2, who suggested that he worries about the future discourse around Europeans living and working in this country, given that we have seen, and they are individual examples of coarsening of language towards not just immigrants from the Middle East, but of course immigrants from Europe, particularly Eastern Europe as well. 0345 6060 973. Let's hear from Sadiq Khan himself. The Mayor of London has been speaking to LBC.
Well, London was the one city the one region in England that voted to remain in the EU. We didn't just vote by a small number. 60% voted to remain. That's a big win. But we're a country that's split. I don't want to heal any rifts there may be, but also there are almost 1 million Europeans in London, Londoners, and my message to them is you're welcome. I recognise the contribution you make to our great city. That's not going to change.
We're seeing this division as well, and 1 million people have signed a petition to say, we want another referendum. What do you think about that?
Well, look, I mean, we are split. It was a very close referendum result. 52 versus 48, that's pretty close. I'm quite clear that one of my jobs is to heal those rifts, and I want to do that. I've got to recognise, though, and I think people should, at the result of the referendum. And so, although I'm disappointed we'll be leaving the EU, I want to still have access to the single market. And I think the government should listen to the people of London and give us a seat around the negotiating table so we can make sure when a deal is done, London doesn't lose out.
Just finally, Jeremy Corbyn said he's not going to stand down. Obviously, there have been calls. What do you make of him? Do you think he's still the right person to lead?
Well, Jeremy Corbyn won a big election last year. He's got a mandate. He's got a plan, what he does over the next few weeks and months. I'm Claire, as the Mayor of London. I've got a big job being the Mayor. That's what I want to focus on.
Anyone can replace him?
I'm busy being the Mayor.
Sadiq Khan speaking to LBC reporter Holly Jones in the last few moments. His statement to Europeans living in London saying, "You are welcome here. We value the enormous contribution you make to our city, and that will not change as a result of this referendum." What do you take from his words as a European living in this city or a European living in this country? Do you think indeed that statement was needed? And if so, why? 0345 6060 973. 7 minutes past 2. Let's speak to Jakob Krupa, who is UK correspondent for the Polish press agency. Afternoon to you, Jakob.
Hello.
Just give us a summation, if you can, of the Polish reaction to a Brexit vote.
So, obviously, there's a lot of concern. I think there are two separate issues, and we need to highlight that very strongly. So, one is a disappointment that the UK decided to leave the European Union, but there's no one questioning that this was a decision for the British people to make, and there are many perfectly valid reasons to do so. Other thing, however, is that the campaign and the outcome of the vote unleashed loads of xenophobic, aggressive comments towards the Polish community in the UK, and I've spoken over the last 36 hours with many Poles who are legitimately and really massively concerned about people making comments at them, tweeting them, Facebooking them, making comments about them on streets and in public places. And I think that's something that words like those of Sadiq Khan are really important to reassure the community and make sure that they feel welcome.
And it goes without saying that those comments, regardless of this vote, in any circumstances, are horrendous and shouldn't be tolerated at all. But your fear is, and fear among particularly the Polish community in London and more widely, is that we're going to see more of that, arguably, as a result of a Brexit vote?
Absolutely is, and thank you very much, Tom, for pointing that. It's actually, unacceptable to say that. Definitely yes. I mean, what we've seen over the last 36 hours is a lot of comments about, go back home, go to where you came from, we don't need you here, we don't contribute, and all the sort of cliches about migrants coming here, taking our jobs, stealing, everything, and moving all the money back to the countries. I think it's first economically illiterate, and we have to face that because we know the data. We know the data that point that people are making positive net contributions to the British budget coming from overseas. There are some legitimate concerns about the scale of immigration. There are a lot of things that the government and authorities of London and so on can do about it. I fully support them in doing so, and I hope they will be doing that in the coming years and months to come. But we need to tackle the hate speech.
What is the effect on the Polish community, specifically in your case, in London or more widely, as a result of a Brexit vote? Is there any suggestion that the terms and conditions of them living here are going to change in any way?
I mean, immediate effect, there's none, because obviously during the negotiation, the UK still remains a member of the European Union, so in the next 2 years, nothing changes. There's a lot of concern, however, and we had a poll last year asking people if they could vote, how would they vote in the referendum, and then if there is a Brexit vote, what they fear about and what are their concerns. And 63% of them said there's a lot of uncertainty about regulations after that. 43% saying we fear visas, work permits, a lot of new administrative procedures that we would need to go through. But 40% of them, that's a massive number when you think about it, said we are afraid of negative sentiment and hate speech towards foreigners living in this country. And I think this is something, apart going from not thinking about EU legislation, EU laws, and all the things like that, there's a legitimate concern about how people can be treated in this country as a result of this vote, which is in one way obviously overblown, one could say, because there are many, as I said, there are many legitimate reasons to vote leave, many people who wanted to go out because of many legitimate reasons for that. But we need to find the xenophobia and hate speech comments made by people who voted, I guess, leave who make very negative comments
and we have to be. And you pointed out at the start, you can split those who voted Leave or those who voted for Remain, or those who voted in any way whatsoever, from those people who think it's a good idea or acceptable to speak to other people in that way, in that manner. Of course, the problem is, and the broad argument is, that this the discussion, the discourse around immigration, whilst during this referendum campaign, has in some way, careful with words here, legitimised that coarseness of language.
Absolutely, yes. I think you make a very good point here, saying that, a lot of people who voted Remain as well, who made unacceptable comments about people who voted Leave, and so that brand them all as xenophobes, racist, and so on. That's also wrong, and we've got to say that. We all need to take grip of the discussion about immigration to the UK and about foreigners living in the UK, and make it a reasonable, well-balanced and culturalized and civilized discussion about it, and try to think about what we can do to make it work, and just not focus on branding each other as xenophobes, racists, whatever, and attacking verbally migrants, hopefully only verbally.
Jakob, briefly and finally, were the words from Sadiq Khan needed, do you think?
Well, I think absolutely yes. And I think this is a very good gesture from him, and much welcome in the community of Spurs in London. Because obviously, as I said, there's a lot of concern about it. People want to know what the future will bring for them, and we don't know that yet. So every word of comfort is much welcome.
Jakob, many thanks indeed. Jakob Krupa, who is UK correspondent for the Polish Press Agency. Particularly interested to hear from you if you have come to this country from Europe. You were born in the European Union. You have come here to live, to work, to start your family, to do whatever. Do you feel that the coarsening of language, and there has inarguably been a coarsening of language during the referendum campaign, that a Brexit vote somehow makes that more acceptable? Now, in my world, absolutely not. It was unacceptable before, it is unacceptable now. And it is also unacceptable to castigate all Leave voters as somehow indulging in racism or xenophobia. But, where we see it, it should be challenged, and there has to be a response to it. And I think Sadiq Khan is right to issue this statement to say, don't worry, don't panic, European citizens are valued in this country, but it's just a shame that he's felt that he has had to issue it. 0345 6060 973. Emma's in Wimbledon on this. Hi, Emma.
Hello, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I feel really, really sad. I feel really unwanted, and I do not understand why it all happened. The language was so xenophobic. Mr. Farage, with that poster, really said it all. Jo Cox being killed for her ideas. And I have to say, I have a lot of English, Scottish friends who are marvellous, and they never made me
Where are you from, Emma, originally?
I'm Italian. And
How long have you been here?
More than 40 years.
So you've been here longer than I have.
Yes. I remember London very well indeed, and it was my choice. I married an Englishman. It was my choice, go to Italy or London. And I decided to stay in London because great city then, great city now. This is my home, and I felt really at home in London. And I worked all my life, and I paid my very high taxes, and taxes that helped paying pensions of people that now don't want me. I helped this country.
And you feel like that the people, because of this vote, they don't want people like you here?
I do believe they don't really want us. The narrow-mindedness of some people really hurt us, hurt people like me who lived in this country for such a long time and really helped this country to overcome a lot of obstacles, but, made this London or the Great Britain great, if you like. And now you're telling us that we are not good enough. It doesn't matter what we've done. We are not good enough for you. And to the point of my husband, who is trying to get an Italian passport, it will take forever. But nevertheless, and we are planning to leave. We are planning to go.
You're planning to leave the UK after 40 years because of this vote, because of how unwelcome you've been made to feel?
Yes. My husband is very upset as well, and he's English. He was born in London. He's a true Londoner.
So there's, I find these set of circumstances astonishing and terrifying. You are an Italian woman who has lived here for 40 years. This is your home. You are married to a British bloke. And both of you are deciding to leave because of the unwelcome feelings that you are feeling and he is feeling as a result of being married to you.
Yes. And he already has friends and that voted leave, and they say we don't really need the Europeans. We don't need the French, we don't need the Italians, we don't need the Germans to work here because we have enough brains, enough manpower or women power to take this country forward. So really, you don't need us. So you want us home. Therefore, I'm going home. And I'm telling you, I will be I'm really, really upset about it. This is my home. But you don't want us, so what is the point of staying? And
well, no, Emma, I'll pick you up on that, because the vast, 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 vast majority of people do not think in a way that would make you feel unwelcome. They do not think we don't want you. In fact, the reality is we need people to come from Europe into this country to work. We need them. The economy wouldn't be the success, apparently, it is, without it. And I'm just so sorry to hear on the first call about this that is a situation that we now find ourselves in. Emma, thank you for your call. Best of luck to you and your husband. 0345 6060 973. Is that the cat that we have let out of the bag when it comes to a Brexit vote? Senior Skeptic has just tweeted, I am sick of progressive Remain voters calling me racist because I wanted to restore democratic accountability to the UK Parliament. Nobody is. Nobody is calling you racist for voting leave. No one. And they're wrong to do so. But we've got to find a way of making it unjustifiable to talk in a language that makes Emma feel like she has to go home again, that has, inarguably, been accepted as part of the discourse because of this entire process. So how do you disengage that kind of language from this process? 0345 6060 973. You're listening to Tom Swarbrick on LBC. The time is 2:17. Getting in touch as a result of Emma's call just before the travel update there. Sheraton Weather has tweeted at LBC, sad to hear a European thinking she's not welcome here. We just want to throw the net even wider. Remember the Commonwealth, they say. M has text 84850. I find it difficult to believe. By using stuff like this, you will encourage more of the same. My husband is German. He has lived here for 40 years. No way does he think like that Italian lady. Laura is in Islington on this. Hi, Laura.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. Now, Sadiq Khan's statement, and as you heard from him on LBC a little earlier, saying that Europeans are welcome, there is no need to panic. Do you think that statement was necessary, was helpful?
I definitely think it was a good thing that he said it. It definitely made me feel more welcome, for sure. But what I was saying, what I think is the case is that there are kind of different classes of EU migrants or EU citizens. So it depends. I think how welcome you feel depends kind of which job you have, which country you're from, and how much of a threat you pose to the British public or to the for example, if you're a Polish builder, you pose more of a threat because of the other builders that are that have more competition because of the cheaper rates that you can work for. So that's the way, but. Yeah, so anyway, I'm going on, but...
No, but they are the ones, it's particularly the type of work that you do that changes the public perception to whether or not they want you.
Exactly, that was my point.
So someone from Germany who is a banker is not going to be castigated as much as someone who is from Poland, arguably for argument's sake, and is a builder.
Exactly. That's my point. And so I definitely feel bad for the builders because they're just doing a job and they're doing it cheaper, and that's fine. They're working really hard, and it's like any other industry. There's always going to be competition. Even in my work, there's competition, and I don't beat up on those competitors. I just try to become more competitive myself. So, and that's the same with the taxi thing and the Uber thing. We just have to change. It's the whole kind
Don't go down that line, Laura. Don't go down that line. You'll start them off again.
But in every profession, in every market, there's going to be competition. I mean, otherwise we should not live in a capitalist society.
Where are you from, Laura, originally?
Germany.
And you have never experienced any kind of unwelcome language or criticism in your direction because of that?
No, I would definitely not say that. Like, it's obviously there are, funny jibes and jokes and things like that. But so that, if you take those things personally, then that's a bad thing. But I wouldn't say I've ever been discriminated against on the basis that I'm from Germany. But I think that Polish people and especially the newer EU member states that have been able to access the UK in the more recent years, I think they definitely suffer a completely different fate.
Well, and there's lots of reasons to have voted leave because of what people were seeing going on in the EU, particularly the Euro as well. Laura, thank you. I'm keen to hear from more Europeans in Britain about their views on the Brexit vote. 0345 6060 973. But at 2:25, let's get a view from Europe on that decision by the UK to leave it. Jack Parrock is LBC's reporter in Brussels. And Jack, you have had a very busy afternoon, not least because of this urgent meeting from the 6 EU founder members, reportedly suggesting that Britain should evoke Article 50 right now. Tell us what the reaction is in Brussels.
Well, indeed. So the main focus now is on those powerful countries that are within those founding 6 members, which is France, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg and Italy. The foreign ministers are hinting towards their opinions, well, not hinting, they've been quite explicit that the UK should invoke Article 50 to remove itself from the European Union, to start the negotiations for 2 years as soon as possible. We have heard from Angela Merkel, though, the German Chancellor, saying that there was no rush. She is taking quite a soft line at the moment, but we can expect probably from her when the negotiations get started, she's likely to take a harder line. Interestingly, also, we've seen in Brussels today, just from my office, I saw out the window, viewing over the European Commission, a flag of an England flag has been draped over a railing outside the European Commission Berlaymont building, and it says 40% England say sorry. So there's some outward expressions and visuals. You can see, I've tweeted a photo of it on my Twitter. And also today we've seen the resignation of Lord Hill, the UK's Financial Services Commissioner. That was predicted. I heard from people in DG FISMA, which is his portfolio, that he would resign pretty quickly if the Brexit vote happened.
I was fascinated to read about a press conference that Jean-Claude Juncker was taking, where he was asked whether a Brexit vote spells the end for the European Union. And as he said no and got up and left and walked out, the other journalists in the room stood up and applauded.
Well, there's a lot of pro-Europe sentiment in most of the other countries. There are obviously big skeptic factions in countries like France, the Netherlands, etc., Sweden as well. But there's a lot of pro-European sentiment, and obviously in Brussels as well. In that press conference, it's important to note there would have been a lot of Commission, European Union officials as well. But from a Brussels point of view, it's deemed that the quicker that Article 50 can be invoked, and the quicker that those negotiations can start, the easier they will be able to put a stop to further referendums or further Euroscepticism in other countries.
Jack, many thanks. Jack Parrock, LBC's reporter in Brussels, keeping both eyes firmly fixed on what on earth is going on in Brussels as a result of this Brexit vote. Let's come back to your calls on the coarsening of language that the referendum campaign threw up, and the result to try and put that back in the box. That's a horrendous mixing of metaphors. Abdul is in Hammersmith. Hi, Abdul.
Hi. I'm an EU citizen. I've lived here for 18 years. And I do feel like it's almost like we've just took something out of a box. I mean, I feel so unwelcome. I've never felt like this before.
What has made you feel like that, though, Abdul? Because, nothing much has actually changed yet. Of course, we've had this decision.
So much social media posts about immigrants and we got our country back. And to be honest, I haven't been back to Germany for 16 years. I cannot tell you a single German politician. I can't speak German anymore. I've lived here for 18 years.
You can't say one German politician. I think I can think of one.
No. Apart from Angela Merkel.
Yeah, okay.
And apart from, I don't know, my life has become Britain.
Yeah.
I don't know nothing else.
So what has actually been, the social media stuff aside, because you can get all sorts on social media, and I'm afraid the only way to deal with it is to ignore it.
Yeah.
But nothing has...
It's an uncertain future, to be honest.
Yeah.
the uncertain future.
But that uncertainty is for everybody, isn't it? I mean, there's no suggestion that you're going to have to be turfed out as a result of this.
But I don't know what the terms are staying. Do we have to pay for the NHS? Do I have to have a visa to be here? Does that make sense? It's so much uncertainty. I work here. I run my own business here. I employ British staff. So it's that uncertainty. I don't know what's going to happen in the long term. It is worrying. I'm actually thinking about becoming a British citizen now and keeping the dual nationality. Because my wife's British, so that's one of the things I'm looking at, just to safeguard myself.
Yes, and you would then be able to not worry about that uncertainty that might mean that you end up paying for stuff that you didn't previously pay for. I imagine, I don't know, this is just based on your call, I imagine a lot of people will be thinking that way today.
We have to. Imagine we get told we have to have a visa every time we stay in. If we lose our jobs or if I lose my business, I have to be kicked out. I don't have a family in Germany anymore. I don't know anyone in Germany anymore. So what would I do?
Well, Abdul, look, I think it's clearly a very difficult period for those European people who are in London, in the UK, because, as you've just said, it sort of makes you question your own existence, really, your own value as well. To this country, in this country, because those questions about do I need a visa, do I need to pay for healthcare in the future, they all are dredged up as a result of this vote. Thank you for your call. 0345 6060 973. We'll continue to take your calls on this throughout the remaining half an hour of the show. But there's other things going on in London as well, would you believe? We're going to be live to the Pride Parade in central London. It's the largest Pride event in the UK. We'll be heading there shortly. News time first, though. 2:30. Headlines. Simon Conway.
6 European.
5. Lots of you having your say on the response of those people who have come from Europe to live in the UK to that Brexit vote. Steve has tweeted at LBC, it sounds to me like you need to get Dave or Boris on air to tell these worried people that they are not going to be kicked out. Well, Sadiq Khan has pretty much done that. He said that Europeans in London, in the UK, should not panic, that they are more than welcome, although it is, of course, the case that some of those people will feel less welcome as a result of that Brexit vote. A Brexit vote which, according to Boris Johnson, explodes the immigration discourse, because if you don't like the people coming here, you have to blame government in a Brexit UK, because it's the government that controls it. You cannot blame immigrants in a Brexit UK for the problems that you think that they cause, or that you believe that they cause. Does that work for you? Does it explode the discourse that we've had around immigrants to the UK, that we have now exited and taken full control, whatever that's going to look like, of our borders? 0345 6060 973. We'll come on to your calls on that in just a moment. 2:35's the time. Let's cross live to central London, though, as thousands of people get on the streets for the Pride Parade, London being the biggest party in the UK. Our reporter Holly Jones is our party girl. She is amongst the masses down at the Pride Parade. Holly, good afternoon. Tell us what we're seeing.
Well, you mentioned thousands. I think it might actually be tens of thousands, Tom. There were reports at one point there were going to be a million people coming out today, and certainly just trying to get through to Trafalgar Square. I had a bit of a struggle getting through all the crowds because there are just so many people out here today. I think people want to come out because, as you mentioned, it's a huge festival in the UK. Lots of people, with their rainbow flags, lots of costumes, great displays going on. People just having a party. But also, there are other things in the background to this particular Pride. I think, obviously, what happened in Orlando a few weeks ago now is definitely playing on people's minds. I saw, huge cheers when the We Stand With Orlando bus came through on Oxford Street earlier. And lots of people saying to me that they wanted to come out and they wanted to show their support and not be scared. Obviously, we do have an extra police presence here, and you can see that, but people really want to show that solidarity, and in a couple of moments' time there will be a minute's silence to reflect that, and I'm sure everyone here will be joining in. As well as that, obviously, with the EU referendum result yesterday, I think a lot of London obviously voted to remain, and a few people have spoken to me and said, they actually were very upset yesterday with the vote, and they wanted to come out and be a bit carefree today and show that there is unity in London after that Brexit vote. Earlier I spoke to Sadiq Khan, and he told me that Pride is also a really good way to get everyone in the city together.
Pride celebrates the best of our city. The great thing about London is you can be who you are. We don't simply tolerate difference, we respect it and we embrace it and we celebrate it. And I'm today of all days, proud to be the Mayor of London.
Obviously, with everything that happened in Orlando, we're having a 2-minute silence. Why do you think it's important? A, I know more people are probably coming out in solidarity, and to also hold that silence.
Well, this year's Pride has Orlando overshadowing Pride this year. The LGBT community in Orlando was attacked. And we've got to recognise, though, that attack was also at our freedoms and our values. And we stand shoulder to shoulder with the LGBT community in Orlando. But also, I recognise that last year, I'm afraid to say, there was an increase in homophobic and transphobic attacks here in London. And so I've got to make sure that as far as the police are concerned, that dealing with hate crime is a priority for the police. I've got to make sure there is a zero tolerance towards a hate crime. And I want to be Mayor for all Londoners, and we've got to recognise that actually there are still big challenges here in London, the greatest city in the world.
Sounds like it's rocking down at the Pride Parade. Sadiq Khan speaking to LBC's reporter Holly Jones there for us this afternoon. More from Holly as that parade and that celebration continues this afternoon. Let's come back to your calls in the meantime on the ramifications of that Brexit vote. Ivana is in Epsom. Hi, Ivana.
Oh, hi there.
Tell me about the response that you have had because you are Polish, and the response you feel you have got because of that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I just want to say that I've been in this country for the past 11 years. I've worked for the past 11 years. I've paid my taxes. I adjusted to the system. I've learned the language, and I feel that the reaction was absolutely... I felt greatly offended because one of my friends told me to go home after a few hours of the UK leaving the
Your friends
EU.
told you to go home?
Yes.
Oh, friends like that, Ivana.
I know, but I've been told to go home. And also my co-worker told me that I should enjoy my job whilst I can because I might not be here for much longer. So, yes, I do feel offended and I feel unwelcome now, but I just want to say that I don't know any other life. I can't imagine myself going back to Poland now and live there. This is my home. And I just want to say that, yes, I do feel unwelcome.
Mm. And do you feel that there will be people who will be more welcomed from places like Poland because we now have control, or whatever control looks like, of people who want to come from that area? That because by very fact of a Brexit vote, people cannot start blaming the person for the ills of society around them because it is the government who has direct control over whether or not they come.
Well, it's hard to say, to be honest. It's hard to say. I don't know what the future holds, and I'm very uncertain. We'll see.
Mm. Ivana, thank you for your call. It's interesting, slightly depressing, that there are people who are worried in that manner because of where they were born and the fact that they have decided to come here, work here, live here, make a life for themselves here, contribute here, pay taxes here. They should be made to feel unwelcome as a result. But it is, I think, in part down to the way in which the campaigns were conducted that we are seeing that coarsening of language, and how on earth you can put a lid on that. I think you just need to call it out when and where you see it. Alex is in Wimbledon. Hi, Alex.
Hello.
Is it something you see a lot, sir, as a German who's grown up here?
Seeing a lot of what?
This kind of language aimed at you that says go home,
Not
leave.
at all. Because I think we're actually entre nous, excuse my French, as in 60% of Londoners were in favour of Remain. And the same applies, funnily enough, in Liverpool, which is a very, very international open city, which clearly appreciates migration and the input migrants can bring to the country. I mean, look at Marks & Spencer, an essentially English brand. Marks was a Russian immigrant. I personally think we've got a big age divide here and a big socio-demographic divide, whereas the frustrated North, in many parts, with exceptions, obviously, Liverpool a positive example, but look at Sunderland, voted in favour of Brexit.
Yeah, but that's not to say that those people in the north who voted for Brexit don't want to see immigrants come here, work here, contribute here. They were just voting for control.
Well, I'm sure this is not first and foremost a statement against immigration, but it's a statement of frustration.
Yes.
And it's a statement of lower aspiration and probably a lot of envy.
Do you think how is it a statement of lower aspiration? I'm interested in that. How do you make that up?
Well, because migrants very clearly desire to better themselves. Very clearly, there are many instances better educated. They're bilingual. They have to, because if they don't speak English, they're not going to progress in this country.
Well, some of them are.
They can look at things from different perspectives, from different cultural angles.
But that's not to say that those people who voted Leave are objecting to all people who come from other countries coming into the UK.
Most certainly not.
But nevertheless,
you
feel fundamentally that the reason why some people voted Leave based on the immigration argument is because they don't want to see people like you coming here.
I don't think so, and I've not experienced that.
So the disaffection in the north and the lower aspiration that has resulted in a Brexit vote, hang on, Alex, is because of what precisely?
It's an anti-establishment vote.
So again,
it's the frustration that say wages haven't gone up for quite a number of years. It's the risk of unemployment. It's structural change, which caused numerous parts of the former industrial heartland of this country far more challenging issues than they say more affluent south and London in particular.
Okay, Alex, thank you for your call. 0345 6060 973. Michael's in Northwood. Hi, Michael.
Hello, good afternoon. I just got a few short points. I don't know how long time you got for me, but just first of all, what I would like to say, it's the recent kind of the referendum result is partly, unfortunately, I believe, is the fault of a lot of Poles and a lot of Europeans living in this country. And this is also because I feel slightly cheated, in a sense, slightly betrayed by the regulation at the moment. If this has happened to be that we'll all have to move out, or if this is...
No, I don't think there's a suggestion, Michael. I don't think there's a suggestion that you're going to have to move out.
I understand, but say the barriers for the free movement. I'll tell you why. This is, I think, is an interesting point. We're speaking now from the London perspective, but I swiftly want to move to North as well. I'm here a long time, for about 16 years at the moment, and I've never applied for any document or any passport or anything like that. But I have to tell you, it's quite easy for a European citizen to apply for such a document. It's just completely proceeding, just 6 years and you can apply it. I went to apply in about 2007. I've tried to apply for some document, but they said to me clearly, why you bother with when your rights are preserved under the freedom of movement and all of it. And I tell you now the sample, I'm going to swiftly move to the north of England. We're talking about the places like Boston, Peterborough, like Grantham. I've got a lot of friends there. I used to live there, and I had some business there. Now I am long in London. And I have to tell you, the result there is unbelievable. And just for society as well, it's something unique, something... I'm not saying this is racist or anything like this, but it's just unbelievable out-of-touch situation in those towns at the moment. There is, for example, the town of Boston, which is about, say, 70,000 people, 60,000 in the areas around, because obviously it's farmer kind of town, market town, so there are obviously people living around there. Now, there's about 30,000 of Polish or Lithuanian or Portuguese, we can call it, because as you pass Peterborough, I don't know if you are familiar with all the...
Yeah, I do know that area, but hang on a sec, Michael. Hang on a sec, Michael. So the problems that people have with immigration that have been voiced through their vote, which tends to be a vote for Leave, you think are incompatible with what, you being in London?
Yes, I'm in London currently, quite a long time, but as I said, I've lived there in places...
Well, London, of course, overwhelmingly voted for Remain, so I'm confused as to why you would think that would be the case specifically in London and not the case in places like Lincolnshire and Boston and places like that, which... I think it seems to me voted to Leave. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need to keep your calls coming in. You can, of course, text 84850, or, like Mamadou from Portugal, you can tweet at LBC. He says, young UK generation, believe in your country. You now have a say. Believe me, he says, you will be welcome anywhere in the world. Is that how you feel today as a European in this country? 0345 6060 973. Your calls follow the travel update. 2:46. The Time. It's not turning out to be a great weekend for Jeremy Corbyn. He had to pull out of that planned appearance at Glastonbury to focus on the response to the Brexit vote. And he's been visiting London Pride, which seems to have been slightly ruined by the referendum result, because on meeting with members of Labour's LGBT community at Pride, Jeremy Corbyn has been repeatedly heckled over Remain losing the EU referendum. This is a video that's popped online in the last few moments. Have a listen to what was shouted at Jeremy Corbyn as he made that appearance at Pride.
It's your fault, Jeremy! It's your fault! Oh, it's your fault! When are you resigning? It's your fault! It's your fault! I had a Polish friend in tears because you couldn't get out the vote in Wales, the North and the Midlands.
Now, apparently that comes from Labour's LGBT community who are at Pride. Labour's LGBT community. And one wonders, given this vote of no confidence that has been put in, this letter that has been put in about Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, whether there are Labour voters angry at Mr Corbyn and the way in which he conducted the campaign to Remain from a Labour perspective. Any more we get on reaction to Jeremy Corbyn, and, of course, having said earlier on today that he would, if deposed, stand again for Labour leadership. 0345 6060 973, the number you need in the meantime to join the conversation about what this vote means for Europeans living and working in London and the country. Sadiq Khan issuing a statement to say there is no need to panic. John's in Fulham. John, do you think there is a need to panic? I hope not.
No, I don't think there's a need to panic. Thanks for taking my call. I'm just very sad today, very, very sad. I feel like I've been through a divorce, and I've been living in this country for 20 years. And honestly, I feel heartbroken, literally speaking. And it's not about the question of me feeling insecure about the future. There is this aspect of it, but mostly it's just sadness that I always felt like I was home in this country. I always felt like I was welcome. And so far, I cannot say that people have been bullying me or telling me, calling me names and things like that yet. But it's just very sad. I just don't get it. You have 2.5 million Britons who are abroad. We didn't get their say on this referendum, and obviously they have a vested interest in talking about that. You got 1 million people in my country, and what are they going to do? They're going to kick them out, and you're going to have 1 million immigrants. Obviously, they're going to be British, but okay. Coming back, retired people mostly. They can go to Little England and just go and spend money over there.
So, John, you really feel that a vote for Brexit is a vote against people like you?
Well, it is a vote against people. It's about people wanting to take control. But what does it mean, take control of what? It's due to the Westminster to actually to say what is good and what is bad for them.
So do you not have any truck then, John, with Boris Johnson's argument that by taking control, by placing the entire border control in the hands of a government, that you explode the argument against immigration, because anybody who has a problem with immigration cannot now blame the people who have come in. They have to blame the decision that was taken to allow them in the first place, and therefore they have to blame government.
That's partly true, but you know what? You got about 300,000 people each year coming in the country. Half of them come from the EU. If you have a problem with immigration in the first place, why not tackle people coming from outside EU?
Well, but the argument for voting Leave, I thought, was to open ourselves up to other nations to not be able to say to those who want to come from Australia or Canada or elsewhere that they'd be able to come in as well.
I agree, and that's fundamentally the problem. I feel like you never wanted to be in Europe in the first place, and I feel like the problem. You'd rather have people coming from Australia, from Nigeria, from wherever, than having people from your neighbouring country. You've been at war twice in a century.
But I don't think it's not necessarily a case of rather, is it, John? It's just a case of being fair in that immigration system.
Well, fair enough then. But if you're fair, again, you what are you going to do with 2.5 million Britons abroad? What are you going to do with them?
Well, that's why you saw that result in Gibraltar, which was, I think, only 4% voted out.
96%, yeah.
And actually, I was sent over to Benidorm, not the hardest of tasks I've had to face whilst working at this station. I was sent over to Benidorm to speak to expats who were there, all of whom were saying they were voting in, or the ones I spoke to were saying that they were voting in, if they even had a vote, but that were they back in the UK, they would be voting out, which was an interesting perspective to have. John, thank you for your call. Anil is in Pinner on this. Hi, Anil.
Hi there. What I really wanted to say was that, I've been here since 1974. I'm Indian, old Commonwealth, whatever. The immigrant has always been at the receiving end of a lot of umbrage in one way and another. the sins of the politicians get visited upon immigrants. In this event, it is white people from Europe, and it is a totally invidious situation to be in. Now, if you really want out, and ever since 73, Britain has been the difficult, the stormy petrel at the European Union table. It's always found the European condition one very difficult to come to terms with. Now, if that is the case, then the soonest we are out, the best it is. And the easiest way of doing it, I would suggest with respect, would be to repeal the Enabling Act which enabled you to join. You don't wish to continue with the conditions of the conditions of the European Union, the treaty, the Section 50 or whatever, Article 50 puts conditions where 2 years is the temporal deadline.
You think it should be now?
You expect, and yes, 2 years is the temporal deadline, but why do you want a running sword to continue? If you feel that what you have done is the right thing, and I think it was the utterly wrong thing to do, an utterly idiotic thing to do, because in a world of large units, in a world where cooperation is and should be the norm, if you pull out from your nearest neighbor after 45 years, and you do this on such false propositions.
Well, look, Anil, I have to say, as someone that ended up finally, after a lot of pencil hovering, voting for Remain, primarily because the expert opinion was all leaning so heavily to one side that I found it impossible to ignore it when casting my vote. There is a definite and huge argument to say that being in a trading bloc of all those countries with all those customers is massively important. And I just hope in finding some optimism as a Remain voter who has lost, in inverted commas, finding some optimism in this decision might be that we are able to find a way of negotiating to a point where we can do trade in a similar way with those countries in order to try and have the best of both worlds. I mean, we are talking about a politician who has led this campaign, who is very fond of having his cake and eating it. Whether it's possible for him to do that, we will have to wait and see. And bear in mind, too, that we are only one day into this. There's a long, long way to go yet. D'Emmanuel is going to be our last caller this afternoon. He's in Norwich. Hi, D'Emmanuel.
Hi, good afternoon.
Afternoon, sir. Your thoughts on this vote?
Yeah, I just want to say I just think people need to just take a deep breath and just calm down a little bit. My background is my dad's Greek, my mum's South African, my wife is Polish. I lived in London for 9 years, and I've lived in Norwich now for 5 years, and we just need to take a step back and calm down. I'm British now, and I'm very proud of the fact that I am. This country has given me everything. And I went to go and vote, and my reason, the way I voted was to vote out. And it was basically just one reason, and that is democracy, the right to at least go and have your say.
And that is part of the reason why Boris Johnson says the immigration argument is exploded, because it is the politicians now who will have the ultimate say, particularly on this immigration debate. D'Emmanuel, thank you very much indeed. I hope we have given, for those Remainers who feel worried today, some reasons to be cheerful. Reason to be cheerful, too, is that coming up at 6, it's Beverly Turner. Reason to be cheerful, 3, is that first, it's Ian Payne.
Oh, how sweet of you. What are we going to talk about today?
I wonder.
Let me have a think. OK. Growing calls for Britain to speed up its exit from the European Union. That's what we're going to kick off with. The German Foreign Minister, the Dutch Foreign Minister, many others in the EU have said that negotiations should begin as soon as possible for our Brexit. David Cameron says he'll stand aside, but only in October, when the negotiations will begin. But he's being asked to leave quicker too. In fact, right now, Mr Cameron says he needs to stay in charge until then, because if he doesn't, it will bring more instability to the country. I'd like to know whether you think he should resign immediately and for Britain to invoke Article 50 and start the withdrawal now. Personally, I don't think it really matters, and if Europe are worried about that, tough.